Yeah. So where do you want to begin? Where do you want to start? Like TFE stuff?
Yeah, we can.
Let's go there.
I mean, I basically dipped out a while since then, right? So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so let's jump in.
I mean, dude, it was honestly like a crazy experience.
Yeah.
Antarctica's crazy, bro.
And for those who don't know what we're talking about the so-called final experiment, which is a total misnomer, by the way.
Right, but, not an experiment, nothing final about it, etc.
Can you describe what it was, like what the whole premise was?
Yeah. Basically, the idea was that if we see a 24-hour sun, the Earth is a globe because obviously you have like the symmetrical aspect of a sphere, right? So you have the 24-hour sun in the north, midnight, and so if we see it in the south, then it has to be a ball.
That's what they say.
Yeah, just affirming the consequent, like on its face, right? Like if X, then Y, whatever.
Yeah.
If P, then Q, so we saw the sun, Earth must be a globe.
Yep.
But I wanted to know if it was there, and like how many people go to Antarctica?
Right.
So I was like, yeah, if you're going to spend $40K to send me there, I'll go there. Like, why not? It was crazy, bro. It was so beautiful. I would go again 1,000 times. I wouldn't actually go again. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying I would have done it again. I would.
You would have done it again. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But so it was crazy cool. And when you go there, you do realize like why people don't go there.
Yeah.
Like it's very intimidating. It's as far as you can see, you're going to die.
What does it feel like? Like is it humid? I haven't looked into any of this with respect to Antarctica.
Super dry. Because like you're in a desert
Yep.
and there's snow and ice everywhere, but it's like you can tell it's just been sitting there forever.
Is the snow like super powdery then?
Yes. Yep. Either it's really compacted.
Yep.
And then there's a little layer of like really dry snow. Really serene. It was cool. It was definitely cool. The coolest, I mean, flying over it, right? I mean, a lot of people were crying. Like it's that pretty.
Really?
Yeah.
Dude, that's pretty amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
One thing on your travels there, and we're going to get into all the claims coming from both the mainstream side and also the so-called truth community as well. But one of the things that I've heard come up, because there's so much conspiracy surrounding this and a lot of people making just absolutely wild claims about you, but then also a lot of people raising like justifiable questions, I'd say. And one of the things that I've had someone bring up, how do you know with certainty that you were actually at Antarctica? And I know that's like crazy to even consider that, but dude, maybe I'll link some of them in the show notes for those who are unfamiliar with this entire thing. There are a lot of people out there that are like coming up with just wild accusations towards Austin, saying he's a shill now because he is simply just telling the truth of his experience, as far as I'm concerned. But also coming up with just a variety of alternative explanations, because whether they're like strict biblical cosmologists, and I would say that's largely the crowd, right? That is throwing claims at you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say strict biblical cosmologists, and like setting aside conversations surrounding what the Bible actually says about this realm, that's a whole separate discussion. It's what these people believe. They believe with a certain level of certainty that the Bible says, and because Austin directly witnessed a 24-hour sun while in Antarctica, which also does not prove the globe. Right. As we've said before, as I said on the conversation with Mark Gober, because of that, though, it flies in the face of their preconceived ideas. So they're throwing up all these claims at you and then also coming up with alternative explanations to reify their model of how this realm works. But I just wanted to frame the conversation before we get into this. So how do you know for sure that you were in Antarctica?
Well, I guess technically I don't, right? So we were in Punta Arenas, and I mean, how'd I know I was there? I walked around Punta Arenas, right? I mean, we were there, and then we flew over the ocean for 4 hours and hit a huge landmass of ice. All the compasses said we were going south the whole time.
Because someone brought up to me like, well, you can interfere with the magnets and compasses with certain devices and things like this too.
Sure, I guess. I mean, I don't know where they would have taken us that looked just like what Antarctica is described as, right? I mean, whatever it was, there is an immense mass or landmass of ice, right?
Yeah.
So whatever it is, you go towards the water from Punta Arenas, you hit a huge landmass of ice, right? Yeah. Regardless, wherever we went, there was a sun in the sky and did a circle. So for the people with like this preconceived notion of the flat earth, which I want to just explain that real quick. That's the whole problem with the globe model. It's like this preconceived belief, and then you reify it and
come up with rescue devices when something flies in the face of it.
Yep. And that completely shuts down your ability to have any intellectual growth or figure anything out. It's like the death of knowledge. Dogma is the death of knowledge, right? And so that's what we broke away from with the globe model. And so I've always spoken out against this AE model, reified belief system, right? Which if you don't know, reify, you know, but reification is just taking a concept and treating it as if it's real, right?
Yeah. Taking something that's abstract and still unproven and speaking about it and assigning characteristics to it as if it's a real concrete thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Giving it concreteness. Also called the concreteness fallacy. So what's so crazy about that is they don't see the irony, I guess. But I'm saying it to say, with the 24-hour sun, wherever we went, it goes in the face of that reified model. Right? I mean, as in the depiction of that, the sun doing a circle over top of that, like reified flat Earth. So it really doesn't matter if I was in Antarctica or not. The people that are coming up with that, opposition to the trip, it's still the conclusion still hurts their assumption, if that makes sense. I don't know. Anyway, I think we were in Antarctica, right? Like, I don't know where else there would be a map.
I think so too.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's a wild conclusion to come to, and of course, like, I'm open to all possibilities. I always am, but I just don't get the sense, given that so many other people have been in that same place. They have a freaking marathon, from my understanding, once a year that is at that exact same place. That in every single instance, it's someone messing with the magnets on a compass in order to take you to a place that's somewhere else. That's another landmass that's full of ice,
Right. And we've known Antarctica's there for a long time. It's been documented for a long time. People have gone there for a long time. Right. The question is, what is it really, and what are they hiding there? Obviously, we know the government got obsessed with it. So you have Operation Paperclip brought the Nazis over. They were obsessed with it. And then we became obsessed with it. We being the U.S. government military. So not we, right? But them, they got obsessed with it. And so something's there. They've shut it down. Every country can't agree on anything other than Antarctica's off limits. And so we've known that. That's been a kind of a staple of the flat Earth awakening, since the beginning. That was actually one of the major things. One of the first things I looked into. I'm like, okay, they're clearly hiding something here, right?
It was B.O.B.'s album that woke you up to it, right?
Yes. Because I had already listened to all of his elements. So then all of a sudden he said the Earth was flat. And I'm like, bro, you're making me look crazy right now. Because I told all my friends to listen to it,
he dropped so much truth in some of the other...
He was right about everything he had said. Yeah, so I was like, you won't listen to me. I'm like the buzzkill guy, I guess. So listen to this song, right? It's like a banger. So what are you going to, And then they're like, oh, you hear what your boy's saying now? Yeah. And then I looked into it, man. Yeah, I mean, I've said a story a lot, right? But for me, I'm like, either there's thousands of pictures of the Earth or they're lying about something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I just went and looked it up, and there wasn't. I mean, 2015, 16, there was not even claimed to be pictures.
Is that when you got your start with this whole thing?
Yeah, 2016, right when that came out. That's how I heard about the idea. I didn't even know what it meant. Like, what does flat Earth even mean? I didn't even know what it meant, But yeah, and then I came into the contact with the ether, basically, and then I just became infatuated with it once I found out about the ether. But
Same, like almost obsessed with ether, and I recontextualized so many things regarding psychic phenomenon. We were talking before we clicked record, like what the mainstream scientific community attributes to being caused by theoretical particles that they've never been proven to exist, whether that's a graviton or a virus, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these things are all much more easy to explain when you understand that the bouncing ball particle atomism paradigm is totally unproven, and you bring ether back into the picture. It makes sense out of all that. And I want to talk about Aether Cosmology, for sure. I think I want to make that the focus of the entire second half of the conversation, but I want to talk about TFE first, for sure. Okay, so that addresses that regarding whether you were in Antarctica. That's sufficient to me. I think that you were probably in Antarctica.
As much as I could have ever verified it, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. Now, there's a couple things that people have brought up, and you've addressed it before, and you had that, I guess you could call it a debate that was moderated by Dave Weiss. Shout out to Dave Weiss. With, I think it's Dustin Nemos. Dustin Nemos. Where, again, he was coming from the lens that, I guess this is my assessment of it, that there's no way you saw what you saw because I already have this preconceived idea of how it should be in my model, which the moment you blindly accept any model, in my opinion, you're going the wrong direction. Like you can, this is a whole thing about epistemology. We'll set that aside too, but like certainty regarding your one's own beliefs. Let's set that aside for a second. But in that debate, he brought up a lot of things. And there are still people out there making claims about you and that you faked it. So let's address a few of those. Yeah. One is the Vapegate thing. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like what they claim happened and then what actually happened?
Yeah. So the claim is I did a live stream in Antarctica and people were in the chat were saying he's not really in Antarctica because you don't even see their breath.
He's in his studio with a green screen or something like that, right?
Yeah. And you would see his breath. It's so cold there, you would see his breath the whole time. And we were trying to explain to them, no, you really don't see your breath that much. It's super bright on the ground and it's super dry.
Yep.
And then I went into the little room that we had, the little box or whatever it was, the container ship basically. And then I came back out and when I turned the stream back on, I saw my breath when I was talking and I was like, oh, what's up now? There's my breath. And then I took a deep breath to try to show it again and you didn't really see anything. So then later we drop all the 360 footage, which is just like real time, 24 hours, 30 hours. And you see me like hitting a vape. Mm-hmm. And so they said, oh, he faked his breath with the vape to convince us he was in Antarctica. Right. And like just on its face, it's retarded because like, okay, then why would we show you? Like, why would we show you the behind the scenes where you see me hit a vape, right? Mm-hmm. But I just found a vape in one of my old bags, and I hit a vape up there, but it had nothing to do with me faking my breath, right? I was intentionally trying to keep the vape as far away from the stream as possible. I've never wanted to like hit a vape on the stream. And then people started taking it and chopping it up out of sequence to make it look like I actually hit the vape, stood up, and then exhaled on the camera when I didn't. So it was a whole thing. It was like hours and hours of me answering these questions on Discord and all this. But when someone makes up their mind, I guess, whatever it is. So people act like that was
you still see people running around saying stuff too, no matter how many times you've addressed it. Right?
Yeah, so I just stopped. Yeah, but I mean,
there's like no point.
Yeah, exactly. It was like they thought it was a smoking gun, right? And it's like, say I did fake my breath. That doesn't mean we weren't there anyway.
Right.
I just didn't. And it. You could look back and see live streams when people were in the shade. You see their breath the whole time. I did a Owen Benjamin live stream there, and you see my breath the whole time because I'm drinking like hot tea. And so there's a lot of moisture in my mouth. You're able to see it. When you take a deep breath there, it hurts. Like it's that dry.
Same thing when you go to any mountainous, snowy climate. Like, for example, my dad lives in Colorado and I spend a lot of time there. And there are some times when it's a little bit more dry, and it tends to be more dry where he lives, where it's virtually impossible to see your breath no matter how cold it is. Mm-hmm. And then there are other times when it's a little bit more humid that it's much easier to see your breath. And it's going to vary depending on the conditions at that point in time.
Exactly. And of course, say there's snow on the ground, you breathe out, you don't see it. Yep. Look up at the black sky, you would see it. So obviously the contrast of the background, and it's incredibly bright there. I mean, you have to wear sunglasses. I don't like sunglasses. I don't like the average sunglasses. You have to wear them.
It's like impossible to step outside without them.
Yeah, bro. You like 10
There's
seconds.
White everywhere,
yeah,
right?
10 seconds, you feel like you can't see. And they're like, your eyeballs will get sunburned. You need to wear them. And I'm like, nah. Yeah, I'm not wearing sunscreen. I'm not wearing sunglasses. I was there for 5 minutes. And I'm like, all right, you got me. I mean, it's crazy bright there, bro. Every angle. But yeah, so that was their big home run on me. Witsit vapes it, Vapegate, all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty goofy, but...
What about the Bootgate one, too? Because that was another one that people brought up. That one
actually was weird. Like, so I put myself in the conspiracist lens, like I don't know anything. And it is super weird that there was just this one random right boot and someone found in Masonic literature that is a actual ritual they do. Like,
no way.
Yeah. So... It was really weird, right? Like if you
were putting yourself in the mind of someone who's like very skeptical about the entire trip and of itself, you could see where they might think that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it actually made me step back and look at a bunch of my beliefs, and I'm like, I need to make sure I'm not doing that, right? But anyway, he had put a bunch of batteries and stuff inside the boot. They were really insulated. They were boots they gave us that keep your foot warm, and he didn't want his batteries to freeze, right? Like the life of the batteries significantly.
Who's he referring to?
Dave McKeegan.
Okay.
Dave McKeegan, right? And he's like a professional photographer. and he does YouTube as well. And so he had all kinds of equipment, which is another thing. They kind of like finessed us, the flat earthers, right? They told us we could only bring one bag, and we had like...
You mean the people who are presupposing globe?
Yeah,
they finessed you guys.
Yeah, because they told us we had a checklist. You had to bring certain clothes. You pack all that in there. You barely can even fit it in the one bag we're allowed to bring. And then we get there, and then the globe side, whatever, they have tons of bags, tons of equipment. So anyway, so he put a bunch of the batteries in there to keep them warm, and then someone looks through the footage and sees this one little random right boot, and then finds in this like Masonic handbook that's a ritual, and they're like, look, he's doing the Masonic ritual right in front of your face.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And
saying that you were.
Yeah, well, that he was. David
that other guy was. Okay, but then by virtue of you being there, you were also participating in it too, type of stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. It doesn't make sense. I don't think that is what occurred whatsoever, but I could see where, like, from a conspiratorial mind, if you're really questioning this whole thing, where you might be like, oh, that's a little bit fishy. I think the other thing, though, with the Bootgate, correct me if I'm wrong on that, is someone was saying, well, in some spots you could see footprints in the snow. In some spots there was no footprints, despite people continually walking on that spot. Therefore, that is evidence that they're in a studio and they're using a green screen for the spots with actual snow or something like that, right?
Yeah. So many gates, right? So I mean, footprint gate, boot gate. There's that. You can't see our footprints, so we're not actually there. Which is like, if you're gonna fake it, wouldn't you make it where you could have snow that you see? I don't even understand. But when you're there, you don't see your footprint a lot because the snow is all really compacted. Yeah. I mean, you do kind of in person, but like on the camera, you can't really see it unless you walk where it's looser, or it doesn't snow. It's a desert. So it's not like it recently snowed. You wake up and there's a bunch of fresh snow there. It's just been there forever, right? Yeah. It's like, an inch a year or something crazy like that.
Isn't it? I remember you saying on one of the streams that I watched you on that it snows quite a bit on the mountains in the background, and then it'll blow off of the mountains onto the ground.
Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, or that there is snow on the mountains, and then the wind will basically remove it or throw it onto the ground. That's like the only time you get fresh snow, really. Mm-hmm. I think it literally gets the least amount of precipitation in the world, according to, like, if you Google it, right? I mean, who knows? But there was definitely no precipitation when I was there. So we started looking through all the footage of like marathon runners, and we were like, look, even the marathon runners aren't leaving footprints, right? You can just watch them all run there. And then sometimes you can see them, sometimes you can't. So, and then we dropped it's like 4K, 24 hours. What else do you watch? It's like interactive 360 video, 24, it was like really 30 hours of footage. It took me days to even like get it where we could try to get it on the internet. If anyone's ever that is huge file, bro, like over a terabyte. And you can zoom in HD and you can see, you do see footprints. It just depends on the angle, depends on where they're walking, whatever. Right. But yeah, so that was a big conspiracy that was very easy to debunk. Honestly, almost all of these were. Mm-hmm. And I will say, this is my biggest kind of gripe with it. I like people being critical. I don't think you should blind believe anything. Like, I get you didn't go there. That's all cool, right?
Totally.
But they don't realize that they're doing is they're inadvertently leading credence to the idea that it is very damning for flat Earth. Right? Because totally. It's like you're just in full blown panic. Like, you have to find a way that this didn't really happen. And so what an observer sees is like, oh, dude, this is a death blow to flat Earth, and that just isn't true. Right. So it's very annoying that that's the part.
Let's frame that in a different way. Just for my sake. It's not a necessarily death blow to what is, but it reifies the globe model. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Let's put the claims on them. Let's continue to put the claims on them. This is such a death blow in that this confirms the globe, which is not true. It does not confirm the globe.
Correct. Yeah, because again, just affirming the consequence.
Exactly.
And really you have to beg like 20 questions to get to the affirming the consequent. You have to assume your orientation's changed, so therefore the sun is at least 93 million miles away, and that perspective's not changing the angle in which you observe it, and that means that there's a vacuum out there so that you could even see it from that far away. There's like 1,000 built-in reifications and assumptions to even beg the question enough to affirm the consequent. It's laughably fallacious. But I'm saying the thing is, though, most people, when they hear about flat Earth, they are shown that physical depiction. All right. Like, and people are just seeing a bunch of people that have told them about flat Earth freaking out, saying this is fake. And if they go look into it and see, oh, actually, all these gates are very easily explained and debunked, then they're like, oh, you guys just can't accept the truth for what it is because it goes against your bias, right? Like, and it was very frustrating because we really could have come back and just been like, let's take all the momentum of the conversations on the table now, and let's actually explain the logic of the conversation, which is like empirical evidence, default position, etc. Right? And yeah, I just feel like a lot of people kind of dropped the ball on that. But what can you do?
Drop the ball. Good pun there. It's funny you say all that too, because first off, I'm in like full 100% agreement with you. When this whole so-called the final experiment occurred, a couple days later, maybe a day later, is when I interviewed Mark Gober for his book, An End to the Upside Down Cosmos. And that's exactly what we said to start the conversation. Like, hey, we know everyone's freaking out about what's going on with TFE right now, but ultimately, this is not proof of a globe whatsoever. Again, in order to claim that globe is the cause of 24-hour sun, you first need what?
A globe.
Yeah, exactly. You need X in order to prove that it causes Y. You can't point to Y and then say that is evidence of X. And you can bring up the whole classic example of like it's wet outside and raining, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to touch on a few more things with the final experiment and just the whole Antarctica thing, because I'm just like super curious with it. First off, are there any other things that people are saying out there that you want to address or anything like that?
No, I mean, there's like 30 gates. I mean, you know, Dave Weiss actually debunked a bunch of them. Shout out to him, like the shadows, people, you know, it's based on the angle of the camera and then the light source, etc. No, I mean, just, it's very simple. The truth is we went there and there was a sun in the sky and it did a circle around our head and it didn't go down. And, you know, it is what it is. You know, like no one faked anything. I wasn't on their side. I don't like how they operate, meaning like the other people involved in the trip. I went there kind of like for the team type of thing. And that's just the truth. I went there. I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't really sleep a lot. It wasn't great. You know what I'm saying?
How long were you there for again?
So we were only in Antarctica, ended up being like 3 days.
Okay.
We were supposed to be there a little bit longer and then a storm was coming and they said, either you guys can rock out and maybe stay here for 5 to 7 more days, maybe 10 days. Like through Christmas and everything, we're like, nah, we're good. You know,
what are the people like that live there full time? Because there are people who live there full time, right?
Well, during the season that they're there, all like Northern European just love the cold.
Okay, I guess, you know? They come from like Greenland.
And they like a lot of them work in Alaska the other part of the year, so it's just they just like it. I mean, and then you talk to them, they have no expenses year round, you know, and they basically pocket, you know, like 80 to 100K a year. So.
Was it pretty tightly controlled where you could and could not go?
Oh, very tightly controlled.
Yeah.
Because they're saying there's like crevasses everywhere. And if you walk outside of these little flags, you could fall in there and die. And I'm not going to say, I believe them, man. You know, like I'm not walking around there. That would have been a wild decision. Plus,
especially if it's like hard to see already because everything's just so whitewashed. I mean, I snowboard quite a bit, and I know that effect is very real. Even if you have goggles on, sometimes just the white sort of blinds you and sort of drowns things out, and you struggle with like depth perception. So I could see if there actually is crevasses, like you might not want to fucking walk around.
Exactly. Yeah. So they basically survey the ground, and then they say, okay, this place is safe. And they say, don't walk outside of that. And that was a conspiracy too, right? And it's like, look, man, we're nowhere close to whatever is being hidden. Because we flew in here, and if I walk outside those flags, I'm not getting anywhere.
Right.
Like you could see, we flew in there, bro. Like there's nothing for miles and miles and miles. And miles. So if there is some like crazy stuff in Antarctica, obviously this government approved little location that there's a camp is not where it's at.
Right.
You know, but
and it could be multifaceted. It could be that there are real crevasses, which is why they won't let you walk around, but it also could be that there's some shit that they don't want you to see, or they don't want you to discover some aspect that would lend credence one way or another, so they just don't let you go there. It's multifaceted.
Right. And it's coming from above the people at the camp too. That's something that I really those people are just there, man. You know, I talk to a lot of them a lot. And some of them are super cool, man. Former military, just like cool guys, and they are just making their money there, man. They don't know anything. They're not in on anything. You know, that was another conspiracy, was that all those people there were actors. I'm like, brother, I promise they're not actors. I talk to them a lot, you know. So, yeah, I mean, I actually thought most of them were pretty cool, and whatever limitations are on that place, it's coming from far above. And then I actually talked to the lady that the dinner before we went, the night before we went, I talked to the lady that is basically in charge of all of the expeditions or trips there. And there's only 3 places in all of Antarctica that they are allowed to bring people. And so I just started picking her brain. I actually have that conversation recorded. I just don't think I'm supposed to. But anyway, when she was answering my questions, I realized like even she can't do anything. Like she's going to international organizations above her and having to get approved and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then they got the permit approval to then come ask on behalf of groups. So, it's so much further above that camp.
Who actually runs Antarctica? I don't know that. I know there's a like treaty that's signed where like basically all countries that on the surface seem to not be able to agree on literally anything, all unanimously agree on how to handle Antarctica, which is super interesting. Yeah. It's like that and then Israel are the 2 things that everyone is like unanimously agreeing on, which is so funny. But
maybe Israel.
It's Israel. That's another thing, and maybe we can talk about that later. I think it's problematic to continue to blame every single thing on Israel though too, because it's like outsourcing our own power and our own responsibility to change it, because ultimately at the end of the day those are just people as well. And like if we're continuing to outsource to them and like say give our power away, saying that they're so much more powerful than us, which like is presenting itself in a very unique way right now, that Israel itself as a country does have a lot of power through blackmail and all those things. But let's set that aside. But who actually runs Antarctica?
Yeah, I don't really know. I forgot the name even of the organizations. I know there are like 3 or 4 that she named. I don't remember the acronyms. International organizations that I guess you would say run it, right? I mean, they approve anything that goes on there. Like you can't do it. So I don't know. Who really enforces it? That's a great question, right? I mean,
Reese, will you look it up? Will you look up who runs Antarctica? Thank you. Because I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, she named a few international organizations. I just don't remember the name of them, but because I'm thinking, like, how do they really enforce it? But see, this is the thing, where I'll tell you this. The way I view Antarctica now and then before and now is very different.
Yeah.
You don't have to have people enforcing anything, bro. You're not going there and exploring. You are going to have to be very prepared.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to know where everything is already. And then how are you going to do that? How are you going to know where everything is? So they don't have to have some like crazy military presence there monitoring the shore or anything, which I kind of always assumed.
It's just so desolate and dangerous already that like no one in their right mind would ever.
Yeah. And it's such a vast expanse. It's would be an insurmountable task. I mean, if you had an airship,
you had an
airship, I would go. If you got an airship, I'll go. And we'll just keep going south and see what happens. But that's really the only chance you got, is to be able to just travel in the air for a very long time.
What were some other preconceived ideas you had before you got there that were totally incorrect? Obviously, like you probably believed that like, okay, there's no way I'm going to see 24-hour sun, but you were also clear that even if we do see 24-hour sun, it is not proof of a globe.
Yeah, once the trip actually went through, I thought we were going to see it, right? Like,
really?
Yeah. On the plane there, I'm like, oh, we're about to see the sun for sure. Because I thought there's no way they're going to take us there if we're not going to see it. Either it's going to be super, super cloudy or it's just there. And I started to realize as the trip actually went through, I'm like, oh, wow, it's there. And then I was just like, cool, let's just go see it now. At this point, obviously, our job is to just kind of come back as the ostensibly trusted sources, right? I mean, apparently not too trusted in the end, right? Because we had uncomfortable information to bring back, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, overall, all I ever did think about Antarctica was just that there's something major there. They're hiding it, and I think there is probably a huge key in terms of like the nature of the realm.
Yeah.
And they don't even want you doing real science there, meaning like, well, and like really not even just science, just like measurements, observations, figuring out what the magnetic field does and stuff. They don't want you really knowing how it works out there. And I still feel that way. And
were they pretty strict on what you could and could not bring?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
Oh yeah.
Really?
So they tell you what you
Wow.
have to bring, and then there's a long list of things that you can't bring. Basically, it's you have to ask for approval for anything you're going to bring.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you wanted to bring any devices to take measurements of like the electromagnetic field, et cetera,
A lot of those things did get approved. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't fit another thing in my bag. Right, like
because they told you only
yeah.
one bag.
Yeah,
But then they
super
brought
annoying.
a bunch, like the people who are presupposing globe
Showed up with
brought-
like 5 bags.
yeah, that's wow.
And then when we get there, we do the orientation, and they're like, "Oh, you guys are like the only people on the plane. You can bring anything you want, many bags you want." I'm like, "What? I'm here with just clothes, bro."
Yeah.
You know, so that was pretty frustrating. Because then obviously the narrative afterward is, "Haha, I see the flat earthers come super ill prepared, and you know they're the science deniers."
Right.
But it's whatever. I was there to make an observation anyway. I mean, you know, mission accomplished. I saw it.
Was there anything there that you saw that you would think lends credence to falsifying the globe? I haven't watched it yet, but I'm pretty sure Steve Falconer just put out a video where he looks at a lot of the footage, and it's not. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. Have you watched Steve's?
No,
thing
I
that he put
talked
up?
to him. He showed me a lot of what's in it
Okay.
on a Zoom call, but
What did he
I
say
haven't
in it?
seen it. Well, what he was telling me was just that the time zones don't match up, and like there's just no way that the observations of the sunset times basically throughout the year could even make sense on what they say Antarctica is. That's mostly what he showed me. He showed me a lot of the data. It was like a group Zoom call with a bunch of legends, Tom Cowan.
Yeah.
Oh,
this is yeah.
yeah. So
I'm in that group too. I'm in that group too. Yeah.
I don't know really what people are thinking though in terms of like it is just pretty simple to me. Like there's a 24-hour sun there. So it's like I don't know if it's everywhere there, but where we went it's there, and it's like any other thought process to me, obviously I went there. So like it's just a waste of time to me. I understand it. I understand people being super skeptical and stuff, but to me, it's just a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to did something else falsify the globe there, I think was your question. I mean, you could see insanely far. Like I would love to be able to go real free and just make long distance observations and do laser tests and stuff. I mean, it was incredibly flat, and you could see super far because it's super dry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't even know how to verify the distance to those mountains we were seeing or what their heights were and stuff. But you could tell you were seeing way further than the globe predicted. But of course they would just say Antarctica refraction. Yeah, it's Antarctic refraction, bro.
Yeah.
You know, it's super extreme there or whatever. But and then the sun elevations relatively matched what they said it would.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like I said, I didn't have enough to really, you'd have to make like very specific measurements.
Mm-hmm.
And the conditions are kind of harsh. When we went, it was like relatively, you know, good conditions, but still, you just don't want to just stand outside all day in Antarctica, bro. You know, so like if you're going to make measurements of the electric field, you're going to go to do just that. You're going to have to persevere to focus on that and get a lot of measurements. And then you're like, let's get inside. So yeah, not too much really. I mean, it was not that I would say falsify the globe, because I wasn't able to make like actual measurements and observations where I knew distances and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think I was saying this before we recorded. This is the last thing that I'll say with respect to Antarctica and the whole so-called the final experiment thing. It's incredibly frustrating seeing how much this is dividing people who are questioning a variety of topics that are proposed by the mainstream, one being the shape of this realm. Because I've seen so many people who, on one hand, will say the evidence that is provided by the mainstream for the globe model is not sufficient actual, demonstrable, empirical evidence, which I completely agree with them. And they're holding the mainstream scientific community to that standard, which I also completely agree with them. Then on the other hand, based on literally zero evidence, total speculation, a variety of unproven assumptions, are asserting that other people who participated, that now Dave Weiss, because he's backing you, are all shills, are all controlled opposition, et cetera, et cetera. Mm. And just like you were saying earlier, like not only is that incredibly hypocritical and honestly pretty disturbing. And it only just shows that those people have a presupposition of how it should be. And because what you experienced flies in the face of what they think it should be, therefore, the only thing they can come up with is, oh, you must then be a shill, and anyone supporting you must then be a shill. And it's sad on that side of things. And it's also sad because it makes it look like we being this community of people who are questioning things, right, have no ability to discern and actually look at what constitutes legitimate evidence.
Yep. Exactly.
And it makes everyone look incredibly foolish.
Exactly. It's like a layup to their like caricature of us as, quote unquote truthers, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, because a lot of those claims are easily debunked. And so a lot of people are just seeing it and sharing it, assuming the source had already done it for them. And that is a major problem. And that's just a huge thing people should think about in general. I call them truther traps. And they lay truther traps all the time now. So they just have some conspiracy they throw out on the internet. They know it'll catch wildfire. Then they'll debunk it later. And it discredits the source, right? And that's, largely what's going on. It totally makes it look like the quote unquote flat earthers or anyone questioning like the globe. Because that's really what it is. Like flat earth is actually just rejecting the claim, the positive claim.
It's a colloquial term to describe those who are saying there's not sufficient evidence for a spinning ball.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like globe denier.
Yeah.
But anyway, so to me, I tried to tell people this. I said, dude, you need to just pump the brakes. At the least, you need to go look into everything that you're sharing. Some of them were like just literally edited out of sequence on purpose, like blatantly deceptive clips and claims. So yeah, that was frustrating. It was frustrating to sit back and watch it, bro. Sit back and watch, you take the bait, and so you're giving them all this ammo, which is because what they do, and they do this with all truth topics, right? The people that are bold enough to speak out against it, they try to dismiss them as crazy, paranoid conspiracy theorists that kind of just are schizophrenic almost.
Yep.
And so when you then pump all these claims out there with no evidence, it's like, see, I told you. So it was so hard. When I was even in Antarctica, it was so hard to watch it because even my chat was filled with people saying we weren't there. And I'm like, if you saw behind the scenes how much they were loving and enjoying this, right? That they got to run around, see, there's nothing you can do to show these people. They don't accept evidence for what it is. And
you
that
mean
is not true.
The people that were there with you that were presupposing globe, they were watching what was happening in your chat, and they were like, see, this is a perfect example.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That's exactly what they wanted. And of course, they're going to pick those people out.
Yep.
And so maybe some of those people are the most vocal. And you only need a few of them to make the point, make the claim, which is, here's the factual evidence of, say, where we live, and then this group of people just will never accept it.
Yep.
Yeah. So
totally. And that's why I appreciate you so much, especially because like me, and I guess I consider myself the version of you on the more like terrain-based health, no virus side of things, in that I'm a layman. I'm not formally studied in so-called infectious diseases, cellular biology, et cetera, but I'm able to analyze these claims, and I'm not coming... Maybe partially a piece of me came from like, oh, what are they hiding from us? But it's like, no, let's analyze these claims in accordance with both logic and empiricism and see if they hold water according to those who are making those claims. And it's not about just latching on to different belief systems. It's about holding those respective claims to account when it comes to empiricism and logic, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the whole point here. And you're like that when it comes to this whole thing, is you're not just wildly throwing stuff out there. You're saying, where is the demonstrable empirical evidence for this claim? Does this hold up with logic? You're very proficient understanding logical fallacies. I think that's like the correct approach with this. And it also requires that you reflect on your own preconceived ideas as well.
Yeah. It's like mastering logic is like a superpower in seeing through deceptions, basically. And we talked about this a little before. It's all built upon materialistic assumption, actually. Pretty much everything is, all the deceptions. And you no doubt get the same thing in that realm of conversation, which is as soon as their claim is under attack, the immediate response is to deflect to you, right? To shift the burden over to you, right? Which shifting the burden, of course, is like, I'm challenging or denying your positive assertion. And so you're now trying to put it on me that I need to prove it's not real. It's like, bro, you got to prove it is real. It's very, very basic logic.
Yep.
And yeah, you see this all the time. This is what they do with everything, as if they, because of some perceived authority position, are granted like the ability to make a claim without supporting it with evidence. If you that's what's so crazy is that's how all of these conversations are framed. You know, is they do very well of the mainstream, I guess we'll say. They frame it as if we're the ones that need to come prove what we're saying. And actually all we're saying, right, is here's what you told us. We went and looked at the evidence. It's not there. Right. So, and then like, obviously with my approach, it's like you go all the way back to the bottom and like, what's the actual empirical evidence that can be verified? Right. And that's all that we can, that's the default position. Everything else, like anything antithetical to that, additional to that, has to be proven. Right. And if you do that with the Earth, you end up, you know, stationary topographical plane, you know, that's just factually the default position.
Yeah, can we expand on that a little bit more too? And then I think this will ultimately lead to Michelson-Morley, but like the multiple ways, and I've covered this on a variety of episodes with Dave Weiss, Mark Hubbard, but it's still good to touch on this nonetheless. Multiple ways you can falsify and show that their claims regarding what should be are clearly not true.
Yeah. So depends. So I break it up in kind of two main categories, right? Like you have, is the surface of the Earth curving? You know, and then is the Earth moving? The is the Earth moving one is just on its face, the Earth is not moving. Everything else is moving.
Yep.
And then that's when you get into stuff like MMX and specific, precise measurements that show that it's not moving. The curvature one, which is obviously the most contentious one, which is kind of frustrating for me, actually, just to say real quick, because one of the most like enlightening aspects of all of this is that the Earth is in a very special position. Like, and that's objectifying the Earth. I actually don't even like that. The Earth's not an object. It's like a realm, but it's
very special. This experience is very, 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 very special.
Exactly. And that actually comes with the understanding that it's not moving. Because if it's not moving, it's in the center, the perceivable center. And so it has to be special. And that gets like bogged down with quote unquote flat Earth, right? Like the curvature part always takes precedent. I think it should be the other way around. I think that the fact it's not moving should be the first part that we look at. It has the biggest philosophical implications, I guess is what I'm saying. But when it comes to the curvature itself, I mean, again, when we build anything, we assume that the Earth is flat, right? So like the default empirical position is that it's flat. When we measure things, when we measure angles to stars, when we chart the sky at all, when we do any civil engineering, up to 100 square miles, you just use complete plane survey. Well, it's not like they start assuming the Earth's a ball after 100 square miles. They just create another 100 square mile section and connect it to the first one, which was also assumed to be flat. So we couldn't even build things without it. And then the falsifications, like some of my favorite ones are radio waves and microwaves. Yeah, there's one test that was done. You can look up SORA, I believe it's called, or LoRa, LORA. And it was like this super long range, high frequency radio wave. It was like a 12-foot fishing boat and then a 5-foot buoy. And the signals were sent and received from like 837 miles or something. It should have been blocked by the curvature of the Earth at like 10, actually under 10. So you sent this horizontal line of sight signal out over the ocean, and it should have been blocked by the curvature of the Earth, like a giant hill, right? Should have blocked it at like less than 10 miles. First attempt, they received it 837 miles away, and it's over 900 megahertz. So they claim that these signals, typically they claim they bounce off the ionosphere and come back down.
That's what I was going to bring up, like the ionosphere reification that they bring up.
Exactly, which of course was just proposed with no evidence once Marconi showed that we could send signals 2,200 miles first attempt over the Atlantic Ocean. And so that doesn't even work though with this one, because they claim the ionosphere is 40 megahertz. Oliver Heaviside, who was actually a genius in electrical field theory, he helped them come up with this to save the globe, basically. Because assume the globe, therefore there has to be an answer. Okay, whatever.
Right.
But he was very brilliant with electrical field theory and ether. One of the fatherheads. But anyway, so 40 megahertz, anything above that, then the frequency would penetrate right through it. So basically it's like anything 40 megahertz or lower, correctly, they say that it would reflect back. It would, assuming it's there.
Right.
So, which we don't do that, but if we do that, it would reflect back in theory, right? But if as soon as the frequency, 41 megahertz, it would penetrate straight through it, just because of the way frequencies interact, And this is 912 is not even close.
Right.
And so with some of like the 2, 3, 400s, they came up with stuff, more theoretical nonsense built on top of the assumption of the ionosphere. And they say there's ionospheric clouds. So like there's density regions there that all of a sudden it goes
just
up.
Pop up at the right time.
Yeah. And they can't even propose a coherent theory for it. I'm talking like Harvard and Stanford. Like they don't even know how to make it make sense in theory, much less like go get measurements or something. But the most they've even claimed with that is like 200, 300. This is 900. So it would go directly through the ionosphere. So the point is, it can't work on the globe. It's like a physical falsification, and it went straight there and they received it 812 or 837 miles. So it took a little time to lay that out. That's one of my favorite ones though, is because I've tried to still man any possible response to that. Right. And it's like, it has to just curve around the globe somehow. And, tropospheric ducting is something that they'll say. And it's like,
what is that? What do they claim that is?
Basically, it's that based on the weather conditions, there's an inverted temperature layer. The layers invert. And so it's like a mini ionosphere down here in the troposphere, the lowest layer, and it traps it. Right. But then that's such a rare anomaly that temperature inversion. Obviously, it's called an inversion because it would be the outlier, right? And it would have to have gone for over 800 miles, the same weather conditions with this very rare inversion layer, 800 consecutive, like impossible.
Impossible.
Never. And
right.
of course, they didn't actually go measure and prove that was there or something. They're just backfilling whatever excuse they can make. Because it's always the same thing. It's like, assume my belief, therefore this must happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of them. And then, so like microwave transmissions, radio wave transmissions, I like laser tests. I like when they're done correctly and you have different frequencies, different colors, different heights and stuff like that. Do they stay at the same height? Those are good ones. And then just long distance observations.
Can you explain some of the laser tests as well though?
Sure.
Too?
Yeah. So the one I really like is they took different lasers over a frozen lake. And so they drill into the ice to make sure it's perfectly level. They bring all the lasers back away from the camera. And they set them at different distances. So it's like, say, the green one was in the front, the yellow one was second, whatever. They had like 4 colors. And then they all should have been obstructed by the curvature of the Earth. This is over a frozen lake where there should be like minimal effects on the light.
And this is based on the accepted math.
Correct. Yeah.
Coming from the mainstream of what the curvature is.
Exactly.
Got it.
Which, 3,959 mile radius, etc. You shouldn't have seen any of them. You saw all 4 of them. And the part that's really damning, though, is that all the lights were at the same height. Meaning, if you were to claim that they were seen at the same height. So they were at the same height and they were seen at the same height. Now, if you're just on a planar surface, that makes perfect sense, right? I mean, they're at the same height. But on a globe, if they're at the same height above the ground, well, they're still curving away from each other, right? So when you looked over those distances and saw the 4 lasers, if you're going to claim that refraction bent the lasers around it, then they aren't at the same height.
They wouldn't be a uniform height.
Correct. The ones further away would be lower. And
I've said the same thing about some of the line of sight observations too when it comes to like tall buildings, is that first off, they would be bending away. And second, how are they coming at an exact uniform height no matter the distance that you're at?
Correct. Yeah, and then another one of my favorite ones you just reminded me of is there's this guy that was in the Air Force for a long time. He reached out to me and said, "You're giving a little bit too many details of who I am, I think." But he was in the Air Force for a long time. And he reached out to me. I verified his identity, all that. And he was in Afghanistan. He was deployed. And he saw the K2 mountain range, which is like one of the highest mountains in the world, from 300 plus miles away. And on the radar and their manual optics, it was completely level with them. Flying at 28,000 feet, the mountain's like 28,000 feet in elevation. So the altitude and elevation matched. And that should have been like 2, 3, 4 degrees below them. And it wasn't. And that is completely damn. You can't even claim refraction. No globe proponent would ever claim refraction if they understand any of it. They just straight up say that didn't happen.
So correct me if I'm wrong, and like for layman's terms on that, essentially what happened was he's at a distance pretty far away from this mountain. He's approaching it in flight, right? And the entire time, the mountain is staying at the same exact height relative to him, when if it's a globe, it should not be, because it should be below you at first, and as you approach it, then it starts meeting you in height.
Correct. Yeah, because it was 28,000 feet in elevation.
Yep.
They were flying at 28,000 feet. So on the globe, it would be multiple degrees below your local level. Yeah, and it wasn't. And that same guy told me, the reason it reminded me of that is he told me they use a very sophisticated radar system that basically creates color contrast, and so you can see runways and buildings and all that. And you can tell that all these buildings in the distance are not tilted away. Mm-hmm. So kind of their argument would be like, we can't really tell. It would be so small you can't tell. You can tell when you're using light, when you're using propagation of very sophisticated radar systems. We're talking like millisecond measurements. Right? And they are level with them. The top of those buildings are not at different, because you would know the whole signal bounces back, and you can tell with the color contrast, and you can read the data. So those two are very damning. The Air Force could easily debunk the globe 1,000 times over definitively. Mm-hmm. He said he wished he could go back so bad just because now he knows. And he talks to people in there. And then he had another experience with gyroscopes that showed that they weren't flying over. Yeah. They weren't even matching, and et cetera, et cetera. So I want to get him on, and I want to convince him. Does
he just want to hide his identity? Yeah. Though? Is that the issue?
Yeah. Because he's still somewhat involved with stuff, right? So, like contracts. Yeah. Got it. So it's rough because I'm like, dude, I need you to come. They're telling me you don't exist, bro. And it's really annoying because I can't say anything, because it's like, it's anecdotal at this point. Totally. And it still would be, but at least it'd be straight from the source. And right now,
dude, it's just the reality is, like, unfortunately, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, when people hear it from a credentialed expert or someone with experience related to those claims, it just hits more for some people. Not for me necessarily. I think out of all the people I turn to in this whole challenging the claims of the globe space, it's you. But for other people, that's just the reality. Like, I've even thought a number of times, and I've said this before on the show, like the possibility of going back and getting becoming a chiropractor just so I have doctor in front of my name, which is absurd. I don't want to do that. But the point is, like, for some people who still appeal to authority, it just hits a little bit differently. And that's just the reality of it.
It does. Yeah, I had one moment where I thought about doing something like that in terms of physics. Yeah. And then I was like, hell no. I'm not gonna, like, that is the worst decision ever. I'm just going to go learn everything wrong. Like, right, exactly. There's just no chance I'm going to go learn about this, like, materialistic, cult of bombarding particle nonsense. Oh, dude. Couldn't do it. There's no way I could do it. Couldn't make me do it. Couldn't pay me to do it. I did think about it for the same reason, and also because I just wanted to get in these inner circles, right? And I wanted access to some of the funding. If we could get a fraction of the grant funding that's done around on just like looking for dark matter, we would have some incredible discoveries, etheric discoveries, right? But
totally, and that's what a lot of people will say too. And we were talking about this a little bit differently before, but it relates. Is that, like, people will say, well, if this is true, then the mainstream would fund studies for it. If this was true, you would hear an expert speak out about it coming from the mainstream, coming from that field, et cetera, et cetera. But we've seen this happen a variety of times, even with the no virus position. Like, and this is without even going into the problems with peer review, that it's just a good old boys club that's totally entrenched within the pharmaceutical paradigm. But someone like Stefan Lanka speaks out like, hey, I am a virologist. I'm classically trained in virology, and I'm now saying that there's actually no demonstrable evidence that viruses exist or cause anything whatsoever. And then he's completely pushed to the side. And immediately everyone's attacking him, ostracizing him, et cetera, et cetera. And good luck getting grant funding coming from the paradigm that's trying to reinforce the accepted model. Exactly. It's not going to happen. Yep. It's not going to happen.
That alone is the main reason they all want the money. Yeah. Like, I've talked to so many people, and I'm like, well, you have all these problems here with all this dark matter, dark energy, pseudoscientific ton is the new particle.
Wait, what? There's another.
No, I just made that up.
Yeah, pseudoscientific ton.
Because it's just it's just a new name every day, Yeah. But I'm like, you got a lot of problems. What would fix those? It's just like a background medium. That's all you have oscillations in a background. Yeah. It would fix every problem that you're sitting here talking to me about. Yes. And I'm like, why don't you go look into that, bro? And two, three people have told me I would never get funded for that. Yeah. So they know that they keep themselves boxed in for the money. And where the money is right now is dark matter. They're just writing checks for dark matter, dark energy, like blank checks. Like, just please find it.
Which is why I really appreciate the angle that Mark took in his book, because that's what he approached it from first, is showing that according to their own claims now, dark matter has been thoroughly falsified.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something people should really learn about. When I normally talk to like globe proponents about it, they're just like, oh, well, who cares? That's the cutting edge of science. And yeah, what, it's like, no, it's all very directly relevant. If there's not dark matter, you don't have gravity.
Right.
And if you don't have gravity, you have nothing. The whole model collapses. You literally can't have gravity without dark matter. Mm-hmm. And then, that it all comes back down to that little test with some, what would be lasers now, some little light beams back in the day. It all comes down to that test every time. It comes down to Michelson-Morley.
Yep.
That is like the linchpin.
I still struggle to explain this. I understand it. Mm-hmm. I understand what happened. But can you explain it to me and also to the audience as if I'm a 5-year-old exactly what happened with Michelson-Morley?
Sure. Yeah. So, okay, you have like a circular table basically, and then you have 2 light beams. Mm-hmm. Well, you have one light beam. So it would be a laser now. The lasers didn't exist then. So you're going to shoot a light beam, and then they used a beam splitter. So they shot one light beam, and then they split the beam into 2. They did that so that they would know that both of the light beams, once it was split, were perfectly in phase.
Got it.
So because it was shot at the same time, it was the same light beam. If you tried to line them up, you could never get it perfect, right? And that's because with wavelengths of light, it's so very precise. Because what people call the speed of light, like what people think light travel is very fast. It doesn't actually travel; it's instant. But
right.
Let's set that aside.
That's another thing.
So the perceived speed of light, whatever. So they kept it in phase by splitting the beam, like to keep it go back to where it's real simple here. You shoot one beam, they split it so they know that it's in line with each other.
Yep.
And then it goes opposite directions. It reflects
90-degree angle, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it reflects back off of mirrors, comes back and recombines, and then goes and it basically then gets redirected to this receiver. So it ends up making like an X.
Yep.
And then they're seeing, when the signals get to the receiver compared to each other. And if the Earth were moving, then one would be a certain amount behind the other. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, if the Earth is actually moving underneath the light beam, based on which direction the light beams are going, either with the movement of the Earth or against it, it has to travel further.
Right.
It would have to catch up to it. One of the light beams were going to have to catch up to the Earth, basically.
And that's the whole point of them going perpendicular to each other, because
correct.
One is oriented, I think, north-south, and one is oriented east-west.
Yes, yeah. Yes. And then they did it, they do different orientations, different locations on the mountain, different times of the year.
This has also been repeated a number of times, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Dayton Miller himself took 5,200,000 measurements. So he was taking multiple measurements, like all at the same time, constantly. And that's a guy who was basically omitted from the history.
Wow.
Dayton Miller. He's the one that really perfected Michelson-Morley. He heard all the excuses people were coming up with, went and disproved them. And then that's where you get the quote from Einstein where he's like, yeah, if Dayton Miller's findings are correct, then the entire theory of relativity collapses like a house of cards.
Wow.
But so...
Sorry, I keep interjecting.
You're good. You're good. So there was a predicted fringe shift. So that's just a difference in where the light beams would be. Basically, if you take 2 waves and intersect them, you get a little shift between the 2, right? A fringe shift. So they had a certain number fringe shift based on the assumed 30 kilometer a second orbit of the Earth. So the 66,600 mile per hour orbit of the Earth.
A lot of sixes in there with a lot of those things.
Yeah, that one's the funniest one too. Like there's like, what are the odds? So if the Earth was orbiting that fast, one of the light beams would have had to travel a known distance to catch up, like a known distance further than the other light beam. Mm-hmm. And it didn't. It didn't do that.
And that's what they had assumed would happen, right? Because they're like, we already know the Earth is spinning. They presuppose that.
Yeah.
And this is just going to show that one of the light beams has to travel faster to catch up to the other one because it is oriented towards the direction where it's having to catch up because the Earth is spinning.
Yeah, and orbiting, really. So they like the Earth spinning and then orbiting.
Got it.
So Michelson-Morley is about the orbit.
It's more about the orbit than the spin.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Michelson-Gell-Pearson, which they did later, is about the spin.
Got it.
And that one actually did match, which is when they really had like a huge conundrum here. But so if you read like Albert Michelson's letters and Ever Morley's letters, like Ever Morley wrote his dad and he was like, we figured it out. He was so excited. He's like, we're just doing this to determine the velocity of light. It was nothing to do with, is the Earth moving? They assumed it was. And so once they came up with the test, they were already celebrating, right? they were like, oh, that's incredible. And so they were just celebrating. It was just go do it at that point and see what the velocity of light is. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they didn't get the fringe shift they needed. They did get a fringe shift, though. That part is always omitted from all the history books. Go to university, they always omit that part. There was a fringe shift there, which is the most important part. The light beams were still separated, just nowhere close to as much as they needed to be if it was actually the Earth orbiting. So then, you bring in Einstein, and that's where you get the theory of relativity, special relativity, and you had to fix it. So in really simple terms, what they said was, okay, well, yeah, because the Earth's orbiting, one of the light beams did travel further. And since it traveled further, that of course means it took longer because both of the light beams are going the same speed. So what happened was time slowed down for that one light beam, just for that one, based on the direction, because the Earth was moving. And since the Earth was moving, it slowed time down for just that light beam, and it contracted the distance at the same time. The distance it traveled got shorter to look like it was the same as the other light beam, but actually it was different. And it was just precisely exactly the amount needed, right, for it to look like the Earth is stationary. That is the stillman. That is a stillman to this day. And then the problem with that even is there was a fringe shift. That explanation gives you an explanation for if they were perfectly in line. Mm-hmm. And they shouldn't have been. If they were perfectly in line, you'd be like, oh, well, look, the time and the distance, shrank and slowed down. And so it looks like they're the same. But they didn't look like they were the same. There was a fringe shift. And that's when Einstein just threw his hands up. He's like, look, man, I'm basically bending the fabric of reality for you at this point. I can't do anything else, like literally trying to bend.
Yeah.
And actually
literally coming up with the idea that reality bends and morphs in order to reify the globe model.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And actually had to go off into full abstract land with time, which is a concept, space, which is a concept. Space is the idea of nothingness. So of course he can say they do whatever because they're just concepts. And then that's a complete reification fallacy. You're saying those things bend? Like, can you bend freedom? I mean, yeah. I always say they did during the pandemic, I guess, but
yeah. But I get what you mean.
Get it. It's an abstract.
You don't bend non-physical things.
Exactly.
Yeah, like abstractions.
Yeah. So, and he's touted as some genius. The reason is because they didn't know what to do. They're like, okay, this destroys everything. And we have no explanation for it. Einstein was their hero, and I think he's a front man, but that's a different thing.
Yep.
It doesn't matter because he gave them an out.
Yep.
But he really didn't. He didn't give them an out because there was a fringe shift. Meaning, so now the question is why, right? And it's because, well, if you look up, you notice everything does move. And they're saying it looks like it's moving. Like you see the sun, it does an analemia throughout the year. You see that there's like obviously the stars move and there's a slight precession of the stars. You see these movements in the sky and they're saying, oh, actually that's us moving. Mm-hmm. That's us spinning and that's us orbiting and that's what's causing it. Or it's just moving. And so the ether prediction would have been there was a fringe shift because, basically we're in a giant whirlpool, like an etheric ocean, and it's drifting. And so the light is moving within that whirlpool, and it would just be expected to be much less, So ether and stationary Earth matched the prediction, and then, globe doesn't, or, orbiting globe specifically. So yeah, I mean, and they never have an answer for that to this day. They've tried. What they did, and what they'll tell you now if you Wikipedia it, is that if you do Michelson-Morley, they got more precise and better over time, and it got closer and closer to zero because it really is zero because it needs to be zero for Einstein's to even in theory make sense. And then you get into the fact that everything Einstein said doesn't make sense. It's a reification fallacy on its face. So what they were really doing though, bro, is so shisty, bro. They would go into basements. And then they would like add all kinds of mediums and make it run through crystals and set it and change the length of the arms. They're supposed to be the same just to get it to zero. And they were talking like today.
You're saying like one relative to the other, they would change. Yeah. Like one when the light beam is split, that splitting, they'll treat one side of it different than the other one.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's so funny because I'm drawing so many parallels with virology because it's a lot of the same tactics that are used. One that happens in virology is they'll do a mock infected culture with their pseudoscientific cell culture quote isolation experiments. They'll say, oh, we did a mock infected culture where we didn't put a human sample inside the dish. Therefore, if cytopathic effect is experienced, then it must this proves that it was caused by a virus over here. But ultimately, they'll use a different concentration of antibiotics, antifungals, different concentration of all of the substances in there in order to make it fit.
To straight up cook the books.
Yes.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, the same thing.
How does that just exist?
Dude, it's
how's that
wild.
just
It's
out in the open? Like, I guess it's not out in the open. Yeah, you know, most people don't know.
You have to dig. You have to dig for it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's still the case. Like, that's where dark matter comes from, right? Is because of the need for the theory of relativity to assume the Earth's a ball orbiting the sun. And so, trust me, bro, they would have just thrown it out if they could have. They can't. So then that's why they have dark matter, and they're just like hoping it's there. And then, yeah, like you said, it's not. It's already been disproven in their own paradigm. Now they're coming up with new theories of gravity. They got modified Newtonian dynamics, but that doesn't work either, and blah, blah, blah. But it's this huge standstill for almost a century because really over a century is when it really started, all because of the presupposition that we're orbiting the sun. And it's just insane. And so, of course, okay, why this is so important on like the meta is like this required them take out the ether.
Yes.
Right. And that is my major beef with it. Because actually, if you want to think you're like flying through a vacuum and then I show you the evidence, you still want to believe it, I don't care. But when you actually shifting like the progression of mankind.
Yes.
And it's a regression actually, because, you know, throughout all of history, people knew there was an ether.
Yep.
And this is such a big deal. I mean, because once you fully embrace that there is something like an ether, it changes everything, even in your day to day, you know, like it's like what I do is super important. My intentions, my consciousness, all of that, it's sending out signals in this like ocean, right? It's like reciprocated. You now have physical mechanisms for why what goes around comes around. Like it's real. It changes everything. And then of course, just the progression of energy and everything else that we would already have made in terms of electricity and stuff like that. So yeah, so now I got beef with them, right? Like now it's not like agree to disagree when it comes to that. It's like, we can't rock with that.
It's less about like presupposing that there is, quote, land beyond the ice wall and what they're hiding there. It's more about the metaphysical implications for how this realm works. And there's actually a fluid medium a plasma-based medium, would you call it that we're all existing within and swimming within at all times. And the implications of that to explain a variety of things like telepathy, like the Akashic records, like how you think about someone and then they just appear or they call you, like the idea that thoughts become things. So many things. There's so many things we get into, even physical things like free energy devices. Those are harnessing the energy that is abundantly available within the ether, which is all swimming around us, essentially.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, intuition, memories, everything. It's the medium that transports everything. It's the primary substance, as Tesla called it. It's where everything comes from. I can't imagine something being more important than that, right? But it all comes down to the same thing. It's materialism. So like if there is an ether, well then where's it at? Okay, well it's not here perceivably. So then it's outside the material world. So now something's outside of it. Obviously there's like 1,000 ways to prove that anyway. Like what is consciousness? What are memories? What are intuition? What is that? What's the ontological premise that you even had that question with? Like, you know, like the prerequisite to even use logic and reason is that the metaphysical exists. But this is way more in your face.
Isn't that wild that like to use logic at all, it requires circular reasoning at its like foundation? Yeah. Yeah. It's wild to sit with that. Like it requires that you believe that you can derive truths about this realm using logic.
Correct. Yeah.
What if nature's intelligence could directly influence your physiology, helping to regulate your nervous system, sharpen your intuition, and shift your emotional state in a measurable way? For over 25 years, Lotus Way has been pioneering the use of flower essences, liquid infusions that capture the bioenergetic imprint of plants. Unlike essential oils, these remedies work on a vibrational level, interacting with your body's meridians and electrical system to promote clarity, resilience, and balance. Katie Hess, who I featured on episode 74 of the Way Forward podcast, has spent decades studying the effects of over 300 rare and powerful flowers, hand collecting them from across the world. The result? A line of elixirs, mists, and anointing oils, and even some chocolate designed to shift your state of mind and body, not through placebo, but through the subtle yet profound ways plant frequencies interact with human biology. I think flower essences are severely overlooked in the wellness space because it really is an incredible way to package up the wisdom and the innate intelligence of nature and deliver it to your body. And it brings your body back into coherence because it's tuning you on an energetic level like an instrument. So if you want to find which flower essences are right for you, you can take the flower quiz so you can see which ones match your current energetic state. As a listener of The Way Forward, you get an exclusive discount. Just use code ALEC10 for 10% off your first order. Or if you're the Way Forward member, get 20% off plus ongoing savings, and just reach out to us if you're a member and we'll get you your membership discount. Just go to lotusway.com/Alec or just head to the show notes so you can experience one of nature's most powerful energetic remedies today. Hey y'all, I'm here with Melissa Kupsch from Remedy Academy of Homeopathy. We are so stoked here at The Way Forward to be partnering with Melissa and Remedy in order to spread the message of homeopathy across the world and also to partner on the eventual development of healing centers across the United States.
People are pretty quickly coming to realize that frequency is the future of medicine. We are witnessing the great resurgence of homeopathy right now. We're really moving away from that suppressive medical model. Whether it's for eczema, asthma, hormones, fertility, anxiety, depression, trauma, whatever it is, it all starts as energy in the person's field first. If we change our field, we can completely change our life. Our 2-year academy is open worldwide to anyone who wants to become a homeopath. We've got 5 lecturers and we currently have over 500 students enrolled, which is record numbers in our field. A career in homeopathy is amazing for anyone who wants flexibility in their work and who wants to be valuable in creating this new world. We have stay-at-home parents enrolled, we have ex-medical professionals, grandparents signed up who want to learn how to heal their grandchildren and pass on that invaluable knowledge. We even have husband and wife teams. So my husband enrolled in the course with no prior knowledge of health as a background, and he is loving it.
Kylie is also enrolled as well, so my partner is, and she's so stoked to become a homeopath and to be helping to spread this message across the world.
The thing that we hear from so many of our students is, I found my thing. Homeopathy is the key. We harness frequencies from nature and we alter the field of all creations. So if anybody wants to join us or they want to know more about it, they can visit our website.
Yeah, and all that information will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about Remedy Academy, also RMDY Collective, also some of the homeopathic products that they have, please just head to the show notes. All of that will be listed there. Before we dive into all of the Aether Cosmology stuff, because it's just so fascinating how you explain it, and it just makes so much sense to me. And I would like to talk about, because you already touched on it a little bit, like the ontology of it, like what is. But like when it comes to things that are inherently metaphysical, that mainstream science would admit right now that we don't have the proper instrumentation to, prove the existence of. This is a whole like another topic, but I talk about it a lot. Like I talk about the ether, I talk about the human biofield literally all the time, right? Like all the time, the toroidal field that surrounds the human body. And like, I think if there is an etheric field, it's also a toroidal field, right? That's surrounding this realm. And it's like, a piece of me knowing like proof of a claim regarding a physical thing being the cause for another thing. It's like, can we say with any level of certainty, and I think about this for myself too, that thing actually exists,
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
Yeah. So this is like, so with ether in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a logical premise, right? So it's like, the ontological premise is logical. So meaning it's not physical. Mm-hmm. Because really, if you step back, it's like, well, I mean, there are some physical things that point to an ether, but like, it's not like I can bottle it up. I can't manipulate it. It's nothing like that. It's not even empirical. So
right. And that would be inferred. That would be secondary and tertiary. That wouldn't be direct evidence of it.
And it's like the main thing that we're, honing in on to disprove everything else. So like but it's logical. It's an antecedent relationship. So And there's many different ways to do this, but it's like the simple question of what exists outside the material world would be the first question. And then you can boil it down to a true dichotomy of something or nothing, right? That's it. I mean, there's no viable third option, so that's a true dichotomy. Nothing doesn't exist. So like, you know, your intuitive response to that, I mean, wouldn't that be infinite regression? Because then you could always say, what's outside that? What's outside that? It's like, well, no, because the outside of is based on this material confinement. We can touch, measure, all that.
Right.
There is no Cartesian, meaning like no measurements outside of the physical. We measure things because there is a physical, tangible material, you know, like a parameter to physically measure things. Anyway, so it's actually not an infinite regression, which is the only critique that could be had there. Nothing doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. Like, it's called a privation. We use this concept a lot to compare against. So zero, nothingness, you know, like a shadow is the absence of light. So shadows don't exist. It's dependent upon the existence of something else. It's called a privation. Same thing like with space. Space is nothing. It's the emptiness, right? It's the absence of anything in it. That's why you always say it's in space, and then they just try to measure the volume or whatever. So the point is, what's outside the material world, something or nothing, has to be something. So I don't care what you call it. I call it ether. You can call it whatever you want, right? So just logically, there's something there. Not to mention that we just have like overwhelming amount of phenomena that can't be explained within the material realm, and you listed them off earlier. There's tons of them.
That was not an exhaustive list, by the way. That was like a very tiny list.
Exactly. But it's endless. How many things? Another one is actually looking at the study of physics. So if you have what people call a vacuum chamber, right? The vacuum's also a concept. It's the idea of emptiness. Doesn't actually exist. No such thing. But we do have the ability to kind of measure gas pressure. And of course, that's the area, that's like the pressure pressing against the walls of a container. But so we know there's really low pressure in a vacuum chamber. So we shoot light in there and the light is waving, right? So I say shoot, but it doesn't matter. You turn on a laser, you see light waves. And it's like, okay, let's think about the antecedent of that. What's the antecedent of a wave? Right. So this is, people always say wave like it's a noun. They say, and people make fun of me for this because I don't seem to understand the profundity of it, which is that like waves a verb, not a noun. And that's actually pretty profound to think about. It's an action. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
So it's like if you have waves in the water, sure, we say, look, there's a wave, but really that's just water moving. It's waving, right? If you can't name one exception. Everything that we call a wave, it's actually has a medium that's moving. In every example, you wave your towel to get the sand off of it, whatever it is. Whatever is waving, it has a medium. Light waves. So then it's like, what is it? What's waving? What's waving when we see the light wave? That the objective antecedent to it is a medium. Something has to be moving. So that's it. I mean, you know, like the fact that it moves as a wave means that there's a medium that's waving. And so it's an antecedent, right? It's a logical antecedent. So no, you can't physically, empirically prove it. You can logically prove it, right? And that's why I so confidently assert the ether, because like you said, I mean, if you're not able to elucidate that, or at least you don't present that as evidence, you're doing the very thing that we speak out against. But yeah, I mean, and by the way, we use logic to prove lots of things. Like how do you prove the existence of any type of designer or designing intelligence? Well, you can, by looking at natural law, you can prove that there has to be a creator of some sort, some intelligent mind, a primary mover. And I won't break that whole thing down, but the first and second law, matter and energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And so you're like, okay, what are your options there? It's like either it was always there, or it can be created or destroyed.
Right.
And if it was always there, you get to the second law, which is that entropy increases, so usable energy decreases, which means we're moving down a path where you had to start somewhere for it to decrease from. So now you have a beginning. So now if you go to the first question, it couldn't have always been there. So the only thing you're left with is something outside of the finite limit of your natural law, so supernatural, did create the matter and energy. And so then you get into obviously like intent and design and all that. So the point is, logic is incredibly important for us to understand things that we can't necessarily tangibly manipulate. Now, when you're making claims about things in a tangible, that's what they do with virology, that's what they do with quantum mechanics and, particle physics. They're making material, tangible claims that should be testable empirically. The ether is not tangible.
Right.
So there's a couple of them. I have a list.
It's a category area, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because when we're talking about like cause and effect claims, dude, that actually that's helpful for me to hear, because I'm like, how do I speak about this in a way? But when you're talking to people who have minds that presuppose that this realm is only physical, they're not going to get it anyway. They're not going to understand that. But just like you're saying, when it comes to claims regarding supposed physical things, then the onus is on them to prove that through empiricism. Then, of course, you can also use logic as well. And they don't hold weight. They don't hold up to scrutiny whatsoever. Right. And it's interesting because I was thinking, as you were saying, like, the wave is not a noun, it is a verb. And it's like, okay, then what is doing the waving? And I'm thinking about when it comes to light, and like I'm wrestling in my head with, okay, that light, they say it's a physical thing, that there are, quote, photons of light, and it always goes back to they presuppose physical things that they have not demonstrated to exist. I even had someone the other day like, okay, you're saying that there's no evidence that viruses exist. Yes. And they're like, okay, well, do you say that there's no evidence of electrons? You use electricity every day, and that requires the existence of electrons. I'm like, well, first off, no, it doesn't require the existence of electrons whatsoever. It's all based in modeling, but you can also have repeatable, observable effects that are useful, that don't even require the existence of a theoretical particle like an electron. Yeah. But it's the same thing with all of mainstream, quote, science, is it comes back to a presupposed physical particle existing that they've not demonstrated to exist in the first place. Yeah. And so they're playing within the wrong category. And that's where, if you bring ether into it, are you of the position that essentially all there is, everything is fundamentally in wave form? There is no particle form.
Correct.
Yeah.
Everything's an ether modality.
Ether modality.
That's what I would say, literally everything.
Do you disagree with anything I just said, by the way?
No.
Okay, good.
No. Literally everything's an ether modality. That's the primary substance. Mm-hmm. People spiral when I speak so definitively about the ether, but it just is what it is. I mean, like, it's the primary substance. This is what Tesla knew. I'm not appealing to the authority of Tesla, but I'm saying, that's what he said was a required framework to even come up with his inventions. Mm-hmm. And when you start to realize what we even use today, the electrical field or, electrical grid that we use today, all required Tesla's inventions. But the point is that everything comes from it. So I use the analogy of like a canvas, and I'm like, there is like a painter. There's a primary mover.
Yep.
Yeah. And you go all the way back to Eastern philosophy thousands of years ago. It's you have Akasha, and you have the luminiferous ether, and then you have like the life-giving force, or prana, as they would say in Eastern philosophy.
Do you think those are all different ways of talking about the same thing?
Yeah. There's a primary mover,
yep,
and then there's an ether. And so something's moving the ether, and then once the ether moves, we get energy in different forms: electricity, static electricity, magnetism. And then Tesla would say that static electricity is the ether under stress, like the idea of kind of putting gas pressure in a container and then make it smaller, and like it's under stress. And so that's where you get this little vibration that's holding everything together. Mm-hmm. And literally electrostatics holds everything together. So that would imply there's something above us that's actually pushing pressure down. And I would say maybe the presence of that primary mover, right? But whatever it is, there's being pressure, there's stress pushed down that creates this vibration. Because if you had gas pressure in a container, if you push the lid down, what's going to happen? It's going to start to vibrate more, right? And I won't even get into really gas pressure. What is that? And people say gas molecules. Like, what is that? See, I don't believe in that either. There's no evidence of gas particles either.
Right.
It's just a medium. And then
how do you, when you talk about like what they say is electrons, neutrons, protons, how do you talk about them?
Well,
Because I always struggle with this. Like, what language
tough.
do we use? You know?
Yeah, it's tough because, well, I've sat down with some people and we've gone through the whole thing and basically, redefined it from an etheric framework. It's tough, man, because the phenomena are real.
Yeah.
I say it's tough because no one's ever going to hear anything we come up with. I mean, we are reintroducing an entire new framework of interpretation of the whole world.
Right.
And it's so funny. People come up like, well, then what is this? It's like, you mean the thing that took 5 million people 100 years and billions of dollars to make up? Like, why don't you fully replace that, bro? But with the electron, you have to take them one by one. So the electron is the terminal end of one unit line of dielectric conduction is what I think it is, and that's what the evidence shows. J.J. Thomson, who's accredited to discovering it, that's what he originally said it was, and then he got a Nobel Prize all of a sudden once he said something else.
Oh, wow.
And they needed the material interpretation, again, because once Michelson-Morley happened, it changed everything. It is literally the most important test ever, like in modern times. I don't know what they did back in the day, but it changed everything. I mean, the fight that you're fighting can be tracked back to Michelson-Morley.
It can. No, it literally. We were talking about that before recording. Like, it really can actually be tracked back to Michelson-Morley.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. And the average person doesn't even know what that means. Michelson-Morley, what is that? Yeah. And you're like, oh, it was like a thing they call an experiment. It was a test. It was a measurement back in the day. They're like, why would I care about that? It changed everything. It changed the way that we're taught the world works. So yeah, I think it's the primary substance, and then when you get into like the neutron, you have to look at each one of the claims. What is the neutron? What do they claim it is? Like, for example, neutrinos is this new thing at the top of like the edge of science, as people would say. It's like, no, it's just the particle theory doesn't work, and they say neutrinos go through matter, and they can't really find them, and they go the speed of light, but not the speed of light, and maybe they look like they go faster than the speed of light, which would be impossible, and then they go through, like matter. And it's just like, no, there's an ether, and everything is a modality of that ether, and you can't embrace that framework. So yeah, like the electron would basically just be the gap in a field. It's, to put it really simple, like if you had like pieces of spaghetti and you started chopping it up, it's like the break on the end of each little piece of spaghetti. Yeah. It's because everything is fluid, right? And so then there are vibrations in that fluid, which gives you waves. And then those dissipate in a certain way, and so we're able to isolate electrons, quote unquote. Like, the phenomenon is very real. Yeah, you're able to predictably know that there's going to be this little quantifiable amount of charge, and so that's actually what it all comes down to.
Can it just be a concentration of charge, negative charge in that case, in one place?
Yeah.
I hate the term negative charge too.
Because then it's like, really, well, what is charge? Yeah. Before we even attribute negative or positive, right? What even is charge? I say it's vibration. Yep. Yeah. And then, obviously negative and positive is stupid. There aren't plus signs and negative signs. And totally. And you get it, right? That's a big important thing to understand as well, though. It's kind of like heat and cold. Everything is about equilibrium. Yep. So really, like, the core tenets of everything are very simple. It's like, okay, everything's connected. It almost sounds like woo-woo is what someone would say. It's that simple, though. Everything is interconnected. Everything comes from the same thing. Everything is vibration. Like, that's it.
Now, on that note, though, like when you're talking about it being, quote, woo-woo, this has made the various metaphysical, spiritual, esoteric phenomena that I was interested in before more tangible and real, understanding, there's an actual background medium that we're always interacting with. Yeah. Just like I said earlier regarding telepathy and all the things, like it makes sense of all of that stuff and makes it way less woo-woo and makes it very, very real.
Yeah, and before you even introduce a specific intelligent designer, it introduces moral accountability. Because, like, if there's a medium, whatever you're doing is being thrown out in that. Like, if you think there's just materialism, then it's like, whatever, I can see the immediate effects of what I do on the material world, and then I can get away with this thing. Nah, bro, there's a metaphysical medium. There's like an ocean. Like, you're throwing rocks in this etheric ocean, basically, with your thoughts, your intentions, your actions, everything you're doing. It's there forever. That's what the Akashic Records references, right? It's always there. Yep. So before you even get into debates about what a creator is or anything, it's his name or her name or anything like that. It's just that what you're doing is here forever, basically. You can't unthrow the rock. So I think that's incredibly important and would probably make the world a better place just in and of itself if everyone had to accept that. And we do. Like in terms of like physics has shown it, logic shows it. Like you have to accept it.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's why I'm like, even like a very deep, like philosophical level, I'm super passionate about it. Cause I'm like, you know, I see so many people, they think they get away with stuff.
Mhm.
They think that they can deceive people and lie to them and manipulate them. And if they deceive that person, they got away with it. You totally didn't get away with it.
100%.
Like it's there, brother. Like it's still there.
It also
But-
makes sense of like, I know you have kids as well, and I'll just share my experience. I'd love to hear yours. It's like when I'm incredibly stressed out, even if I'm trying to stuff it down and shield my kids from any physical evidence of my stress, because I'm, cognizant of like, oh, I don't want to project that onto them. They still feel it, and it reflects in them. And of course, children are a perfect mirror, but that's why, because it's still emanating out through your individuated, let's say, biofield into the ether, and then their individuated field is picking up on it. It's all one thing, but different distortions, variations of the ether, you could say. And their fields are picking up on it, and it's impacting them in a very real way.
Yeah, totally. Like even young age, bro. Like, yeah, Aaliyah does that a lot. She'll say, don't be mad, Dada, or, don't be mad, Daddy. I'm like, well, I'm not mad. She can tell something,
She can tell,
something
100%.
aggravated me.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter, she
Exactly.
knows. I'm like, no, Daddy's not mad. Something's
She
going
knows,
on.
exactly.
Yeah, 2 years old, Yeah, I think that they probably communicate on that level. I think it almost gets bred out of us.
100%.
Yeah, it's like Benjamin Button.
Totally agree, dude. This year at the festival that I run, Confluence, we have at least 7 kids doing an in-person blindfolded vision demonstration.
Oh, nice.
I've seen it in person myself. Reese, how many episodes do I bring this up? Like every other episode? But again, when you bring in the context of the ether, it just makes sense of it. But it's also that this is what we are all capable of at our conception. Like the parents of both sets of kids that I've seen demonstrate blindfolded vision say the same thing, that all kids have the capacity to learn this, have the capacity to activate this, and it becomes increasingly more challenging the older you get. And I think that's because you're more conditioned, more indoctrinated at that point in time. So it becomes a little bit harder to do that.
Yeah, and also think about like how we're told to interpret the world, man. Like the next Nikola Tesla is being told that a little particle bounces around called the electron. But if you just told him what Tesla said, for example, he would have a totally different outlook.
Yeah.
And maybe, make incredibly profound discoveries early on. Same with, I think, the children. The children are being told these ideas through a materialistic framework, oftentimes, certainly when they get into any schooling system.
Totally.
So that's when it really, I think that's when you just completely shut those children off.
Mm-hmm.
It's like criminal.
It's criminal.
It's
totally
criminal. And they're like
man.
all sit down and do it at the same pace.
Well, luckily we got dads like you and I who are not doing that with our kids, and other people who are listening to this. The thing is, like, a lot of people who listen to my podcast, watch my podcast, people that I'm friends with, and you hear this term thrown around quite a bit, quantum. Like, it frustrates me because I don't think they understand the problems with quantum mechanics, quantum physics, how it's all entirely unproven, and how it's all ultimately derived from the same atomism, particle-based ideas of how this realm works. But I get what they're saying. Like when you and I would call something the etheric field, right? Or the information field or something like this. They say the quantum field. And it just really bothers me that term is used. Yeah, just what are your thoughts on the whole like quantum paradigm?
Yeah. Okay. Big. This is very important.
Yeah.
So, well, like what does quantum mean? You get, I think it's a German word, quanta, to count. So if you're coming from a materialistic framework, you have to count everything. Everything can be counted, assumptively, right? That's actually where this all started. The whole idea of quantum is that they're going to count everything. And it is very convenient to count things because then you're able to put them in equations and then you're able to predict things. So I actually don't have too much beef with the math. I just have beef with the reification of the math. So they had to make a model to count everything, throw it in an equation, and then they reified it. They forgot it was a model, right? That's the issue. But yeah, so like just in general, quantum is the need to give a name to every different little phenomena so you can count it. Like it's that simple. And I will say quantum mechanics is like one of the most cutting edge fields of discovery in the world. Like it is. Like they are really breaking it down. And then for example, they'll tell you something like quantum foam exists. And this is just basically, in really simple terms, having a vacuum chamber, and they know how much like pressure's in it, how much charge should be in it. And then they look at it for a second, all of a sudden something pops up and they're like, where does it come from? It came from somewhere. So then they started saying that there's this infinite amount of quantum fields in the background. It's basically just an indirect way of acknowledging the ether.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the homogeneous medium, you have like this infinite need to name it. And they want to count it. They want to count it. So it's the materialistic need to count.
What about quantum entanglement?
So like, yeah, it's a theory and an idea of, again, that's immediately explained by the ether.
Yes.
Every time. Yeah. So it's just like, there's like, oh, it's this profound, complex thing. This is when people go off and say like, oh, look, the world's just so complex, you can't understand it. I say ineptitude conflates profundity with paradox, or paradox with profundity, right? Because it's like, yeah, you're in a paradox because your paradigm is wrong.
Yes.
It's not that it's so profound that we can never understand it. It's that you're wrong. People do this with relativity a lot. It's so paradoxical. People think, oh, it just must be like above me. Like, no, it's actually dumb. It's actually stupid.
It's dumb, yeah.
Like Einstein said he didn't understand it himself and he stole it. But he stole it anyway. So, but yeah, like I don't know why everyone throws the word quantum. I think I do. It's because it's trickled down to us that it's like whoa, we discovered the world is much more complex than we knew it was. And that's true, they did, because they went in there with the lens of materialism. Yeah. That's all. So quantum entanglement is just a mathematical trick. So it's not like it's not actually even observational most of the time. It is mathematical need, right? It's like, oh, well, if we assume our model, assume our paradigm, we do the math, it's like this has to be able to happen. That's really all it is. But I will say, instantaneous action at a distance, similar idea, makes sense in an ether.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. If there is a medium, then it totally makes sense.
Right.
And it makes sense in a like much more easy to understand way.
It only makes sense if there's I mean, that's why Einstein called it spooky or whatever.
Yeah. Spooky action at a distance.
Yeah, and then you go all the way back to this fairy tale of heliocentrism, you get Isaac Newton, right? And he was like, there has to be a medium if there's instantaneous action at distance. Mm-hmm. And he didn't call it that, but that's what because he said gravity was just instantly happening. And he's like, I don't understand how that could be possible. God must be doing it, but there definitely has to be a medium that's touching both things at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it's that simple, right? Like if something's going to happen here and here instantly, then they have to be connected. Mm-hmm. And like the real simple analogy is like having a lake and then there's an earthquake, right? If the whole lake will move at the same time, right? Because it's just one medium. And so all the water's moving together. Mm-hmm. Now it's not the perfect analogy because then where's the epicenter of the earthquake? And then whatever, put it right in the middle of the center of the lake. It doesn't matter. But so instantaneous action at a distance, this thing that has been considered the most like confounding phenomena ever actually is very simple. It's just that there's a medium there, right? There's a medium there. It's like if I pull a rope, it's like as soon as I pull it, does it instantly move? It's if there's a huge gap there, you're going to be real confused if I move over here and all of a sudden that's is moving. So that part is wild because this again, it's redundant, but it all goes back to the same thing, man. It goes back to the same thing. It's like the reason that we have quantum physics that we currently have is because the need to throw out the ether. Mm-hmm. If you didn't throw out the ether, then you don't even have to do any of that. And it's so funny, bro. You look into quantum mechanics and physics, it's just the ether. It's like quantum foam. It's something that's beyond the world that we see, and energy comes from it, but we don't know what it is. And then here are different fields. And they're like, oh, it's the electron field. What's the electron field? It's it's a mathematical equation where we describe where the electron is. I'm like, what? So what's the electron? It's an excitation within the electron field. So I'm like, it's an excitation of math? It's so stupid. And I asked that question right there to many PhDs, physicists or whatever. There is no answer. It's just stupid. But it's the same thing always. But this is what people should ask though. Like, so why not just accept the ether then? And it has major implications, philosophical ones. So then now you are like, who's kind of calling this? Who's directing this where they want to make sure that this philosophical implication is avoided?
And what are those major philosophical implications?
Well,
I'm sure I could come up with some, but I know you've thought about this way more than me.
Yeah, well, the obvious one is with Michelson-Morley that the Earth is not moving.
Mm-hmm.
So then, like we said earlier, it's like the Earth is special. So if the Earth's in the center of everything that we can see, if you want to say it specifically accurate, as far as we can see, Earth's in the center of it, then how to get there? And so there seems to be a concerted effort or interest in avoiding the idea of intelligent design. And the answer for that is obvious, right? Because like, if I want to kick in your door, if your family's in there, it's going to be way harder to get in there than if you're just some like loser on the couch that you don't care. Right. It's like, if you have something to live for, then you're much harder to conquer. Also, the government can't be God if you have a real creator. You're right. And so that's who you answer to.
Yep.
So like, actually, I don't have a 7:00 curfew, right? But the creator didn't tell me I had a curfew tonight. So I'm actually not going to do that, nor be scared of the air that clearly was made for me to breathe and stuff. So I think that those are the two major ones, right? It's power and control. And, the implications that this place is special. So of course you are. We have domain on the Earth. So then it's like, well, wow. So the most special place, you were given the most special position on it. So that's so empowering, and that's very, very hard to control people that way.
Totally. The other thing that I want to get into just real quick, if we could, and if this isn't relevant, we can cut this out. But I want to talk about Robert Bennett and what you've discussed with him, because he is a credentialed PhD in which field is it again?
Physics.
In physics. Okay. Yeah. What are some of the conversations you've had with him regarding all this?
A lot about geocentrism, which means Earth-centered. He says geostatics. We don't know for sure what the center is because we can only see so far. He's like, you're never going to catch this guy. Mm-hmm. So that's why he says that. But because Earth-centered, I mean, I say geocentrism as far as we can see, but he's like, well, technically we just know it's not moving. Anyway, just to lay out who he is, right? He's a PhD in physics, worked with some people that worked directly with Einstein, wrote his thesis in like the relative motion of rigid bodies. So it's like specific to the field that we're talking about of relativity. He found out relativity is not true. And then he found out there's an ether, of course. And that's why relativity was even a thing, because you had to answer Michelson-Morley, and that takes you to the Earth's not moving. So he had seen some of my stuff. We ended up linking up, mutual contacts, and then we have incredible conversations about everything. I'm like, what is the ether? How does it work? It's so freeing to talk to someone that is like him with a whole lifetime experience, who is just accepting the truth for what it is, like what the evidence says. And so it's like, okay, let's figure out how it works. So basically that's all we do. We talk about how it works. We bounce ideas off each other. And then we think about, oftentimes we talk about other things that kind of definitively prove that the Earth's not moving or that there is an ether. What are the properties of the ether, right? And so like he broke down how the Newton bucket experiment, quote unquote, proves the Earth's not moving. And it was like a super profound moment for me where I'm like, dude, you're totally right. Let's go try it out. I'll set it up, PhD astronomer, you should debate him. And then he's just stuttering, has no answer, Like a bucket with water proves the Earth's not moving. Things like that. So conversations about evidences of the Earth being stationary. And then what I really get excited to talk to him about is like, let's kind of spitball and figure out the properties of the ether, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how does it work? And then, for example, we talked a lot about Airy's failure. Airy's failure is when, really simply, you have a telescope and you look at a star. If, say, the star is directly above you, you actually have to tilt the telescope a little bit. It doesn't even matter if it's directly above you. When you have to tilt the telescope a little bit to keep the star in the center of the telescope. So if you line it right up on there, you actually have to tilt the telescope. So what that shows is that there is some type of movement. Like when you're seeing this light, it's moving somehow. It's the idea of basically take a cannonball and drop it in the cannon. If you move the cannon, it's not going to get in the cannonball. To actually get the cannonball to fall back in the cannon, you're going to have to tilt it right at an angle while it's moving so it can fall in. You have to catch it at the right angle, right? So you have to do that with the telescope.
What you're trying to say here is that it's falling through a medium.
That's where it gets to. Yeah. So what they did was they said
the light itself is falling through a medium.
Yeah. Well, I would say light is the medium. But
light is medium.
Yeah, that's what I would say. That's what I would say.
Okay.
But and that's a little further down the road. So you have the telescope, and it is true you have to tilt it, so that shows that something's moving.
Mm-hmm.
Like again, like if you just drop the cannonball, you're gonna have to move the cannon at an angle to catch it at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would say the Earth is moving, and that's why.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually, if you Google it, right, it'll tell you this is proof the Earth is moving, right? Which of course it isn't, even if it matched what they expected. But long story short, Airy was like, well, okay, let's put water in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if light is actually traveling to us and the Earth is moving, as the light gets in the water, it's going to slow down, which means it's going to take longer to get through the telescope. So we're going to have to tilt it even more, right? Because if we're moving, the Earth is still going to be moving with the telescope. So now the light's going to take longer to get through the telescope because there's water in it. So then we're going to see a greater angle.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew exactly what that angle should be. You just do the math. And it did not do that. It did not do that. So it showed it wasn't the Earth that was moving.
Wow.
It showed definitively it wasn't. I actually brought this up on Tim Pool, and the guy kind of panicked because there is no answer. It's actually maybe more damning than Michelson-Morley.
Right.
I know it's hard to believe.
Sounds like it to me.
And it's just way simpler.
Yeah.
You can use like really simple analogies. I don't have to fully explain interferometry. MMX, is like very foreign to people, but people can get this concept. Anyway, we talked about that. So then we're like, okay, exactly how does it work, right? Exactly how does it work? There's an ether with a vortex, basically a giant whirlpool of an ocean. And
this is like Aether Cosmology, as you call it, right? And you're continuing to refine this, basically how the ether interacts with this realm, how we interact with it, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. And then so what exactly is going on, and what are these stars? How do they interact with us?
Mm-hmm.
Very profound conversations that get brought on the table. I will say, I think that's what people don't ever think about is we've been told so many fairy tales. So they're like, this star is 46 billion light years away or whatever. So we're just like, people check out. Once you find out that's all pseudoscience, you just check out. Right. But actually the questions on the table are very profound. It's like, what is a star?
Dude. And almost every night I lay under the stars because I feel like it gives me perspective again. And I think that there is something so nefarious about how much light pollution there is and how much man-made stuff we're constantly bombarded with that we are completely overlooking or forgetting our inherent connection to the creator of this realm.
Yeah. I want to tell you, so like 3 times in my life, I've been looking at the stars, laying out, looking at the stars, and a shooting star perfectly, it happens at the exact moment I have like an epiphany of thought.
Wow. That's epic.
The exact moment.
Yeah.
Like they were connected.
Yeah.
I know that sounds crazy.
No, dude, that's dope. That's so cool.
It totally happened
it's
3
so
different
cool,
times.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's like immediate confirmation the epiphany is correct. That's how I would interpret it,
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. So I'm wondering what exactly are stars and what exactly is our consciousness?
What do you think? Obviously, this is speculation.
It's a good question.
Admit that. Yeah.
I think they involve some type of sentience.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I don't know what. I don't know if they're all the same thing. I really don't know.
Can I tell you what my son said?
Sure.
So my son has a tendency to have just these incredibly profound insights, and it most often comes when we're on long road trips and he's sitting in the back of the car with nothing and is just staring out at nature. And then he'll turn to us and say just something incredibly profound. We actually have a whole notes section on our phone of stuff we want to turn into eventual like coffee table book because of the stuff that he says. But about 2 months ago, he and I were laying out underneath the stars, and I was in the middle of putting him to bed, and I just had an epiphany. I was like, I should take him out to like really look at the stars. We don't do that enough. So we snuck out and snuck around my wife so she didn't, what are you doing? And just laid out and looked at the stars. And immediately, within like the first 30 seconds of us laying down, he looks at me and goes, Dad, do you ever wonder if like stars are homes for our souls? And he doesn't mean that in like a... the idea that, in a past life, I was a Pleiadian on another planet in a different star system. I know that's not what he's meaning. He's like, Dad, do you ever wonder if stars are the home for our souls? And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he's like each of us is coming from a star and that's where our true home is. And I was like, so I come from a different star than you. He's like, no. We travel to Earth in a family and that family comes from the same star. And that's what he said.
That's crazy.
It's like, whoa, dude. Like, I could totally see that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. It was so cool to hear that.
Yeah, that's what Owen Benjamin always says too. He's like, I'm just trying to wait on my son to tell me what the moon is. You know?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, totally.
It's funny. It's just children have this very deep, like intuitive connection to something that they're. Again, it just seems that it gets like bred out of you.
Well, and this just hit me too right now. I'm trying to articulate this in the best way that I can. It's like that's what we're trying to get back to. That's why we ask all these questions, and that's why we reject the mainstream. It's yes, in part because we're like, oh, what are they hiding from us about the truth of this realm? But it's more like getting back to that childlike wonder, knowing that the answers aren't going to be found in the mainstream. They're going to be found the more that we understand that paradigm is totally false. Come back to connecting with nature and the true essence of who we are outside of that conditioning and indoctrination and programming, and the answers will be found there. Yeah. That's what we're trying to get back to.
Yeah, it's crazy. Maybe it's just designed in such a way that you're supposed to drift away and then come back.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's not just the system doing it.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's like a design thing.
Like the veil of forgetting. It's purposeful.
Exactly.
And like, can you go through, even when you like bring up trauma and all the things people go through, freaking spraining my ankle right before an interview when my wife just had her third baby, all of us go through shit, but it's like, can you go through all of that and the indoctrination and programming and still unravel and come back to who and what you truly are? Which is like, I was just talking to Dr. Zach Bush about this when I had him on the other day. There's something that is ineffable that we can't name, but I even see you light up when I bring up the star thing, dude. I see like a childlike wonder in you, right? Mm-hmm. It's because it's hitting on something that is so much deeper about who and what we truly are and how interconnected we all are and like what this realm really is, that is rooted in this like childlike wonder and awe and reverence and love for this realm, you know? And it's like, can we still come back to that after going through all the programming and the trauma and all of those things? And can those things offer a helpful, necessary contrast so that we can better appreciate the childlike wonder and awe and love and curiosity and all those things? You know?
Oh, yeah. And that's great. The scriptures say it a lot too. So this is like an ancient idea, is to tap into what the children have. Be like a child. Yeah, that's such a beautiful thing. I think it requires just a certain amount of growth to even acknowledge that, because obviously you have to come over a certain amount of ego.
Yeah.
To ever entertain the concept that a child knows something way more than you, like knows more profundity. And, you know, but I think they do. And I think they communicate within that understanding, and we think like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And they're like way above us.
Totally.
I mean, dude, my daughter's 2 and she does it all the time. So I totally think this is the thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I think protecting them is so important. You know, I think it's crazy. It's maybe explaining an attack on them. But
yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a very profound idea. Especially like, you know, they've done all kinds of studies on this when babies, I'm talking like a couple months old, like if the dad comes home upset, the baby cries. Mm-hmm. It could be upstairs in another room, and the baby cries. It can feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then what do? We teach them how to speak words.
Yeah.
So now we're teaching them to run their mind and thought through filters of words. And they're like, they got to find a word to express what they think that they're, you know, feeling. So then if we keep going with ideas to fit the words within, you know what I'm saying? You can see how very quickly you get put into a little box.
Yes, yeah. 100%. Have you heard the concept that like the original language isn't even spoken? It's telepathy. That's the original language of man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've even heard the conspiracy within that of the Tower of Babel, and that's the way that they communicated. Yeah, and then, you know, the Georgia Guidestones?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that were on there before they got blown up, I went twice. We actually captured the only...
Oh, you went to them in person?
Yeah. We captured the only time lapse ever taken there of the star trails. And so, because, you know, the hole, you could only see Polaris in the hole.
Which I feel like is their way of like admitting and then also mocking like, hey, this is all stationary.
Yes. Yeah. And it's pretty cool. You literally can only see that star, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like this, 23 centimeter long, you know, diagonal little cut. And we took the time lapse. It was cool. And then obviously, so it's a compass, a clock, and a calendar, blah, blah, blah. You look at it and it's very clearly homage to Babylon. And it says, unify the world in one single living language. So living meaning adaptable, right? As in like not limited. I think that's what it's all about. I think that the story of the Tower of Babel, which exists geographically everywhere pretty much, that's what it was. They were communicating without physically speaking, and then all of a sudden they had to physically speak, and all of a sudden they didn't physically speak the same, right? This is the story.
Yeah.
And that they want to get back to that. And that's when I think you get into, they have to do something crazy to do that. Like put chips in people's brains or something crazy.
Most healthcare today operates on an outdated mechanistic model, treating the body like a battlefield rather than a self-healing system. You wait months for an appointment only to receive a rush diagnosis that labels you rather than truly understanding your unique health. Even in holistic health, many practitioners rely on endless lab tests and supplement protocols, addressing symptoms instead of the root cause. And the result? Another prescription or supplement regimen that merely suppresses or masks symptoms rather than facilitating true healing, whether the imbalance was physical, emotional, energetic, or a mix of all three. And that's why Dr. Tom Cowan co-founded the New Biology Clinic, to offer something radically different. As one of the most respected natural health doctors in the world, Dr. Cowan has spent decades challenging conventional medicine and advancing a deeper understanding of human biology, water, and natural health. His work isn't just about rejecting the mainstream, it's about offering a more truthful, biologically coherent approach for healing. The New Biology Clinic recognizes that health isn't about fighting disease, it's about restoring balance. You're not a diagnosis, you're an individual with a unique story, and healing should honor that. With virtual consultations available worldwide, the clinic offers a flat-rate monthly membership that gives you direct access to practitioners who take the time to actually listen. Members also get exclusive health live streams, a resource library, and live sessions covering everything from biofield tuning and breathwork to movement and meditation, all designed to support whole body healing. And if you're not ready for a membership, you can book a one-time appointment, sign up for an enrichment-only membership for the healing modalities alone, or schedule a free connection session with one of the care team members to see how the New Biology Clinic can help in your specific situation. This isn't about keeping you dependent on doctors. It's about making you sovereign over your health. Head to newbiologyclinic.com and use code THEWAYFORWARD, and that's spelled The Way, F-O-R-W-A-R-D, for $50 off account activation, or just head to the show notes for more info. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com for $150 off. Your body already knows how to heal, and New Biology Clinic helps you remember. I've heard people say that, like, with the millimeter wave devices, the wearable tech, et cetera, they're trying to create like a synthetic version of the ether, right? And I really think it's rooted in like a replacement for God, whereas AI is God. So like God, I define as the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent creator of all that we are inextricably linked to, fundamentally a part of, that is infused within the ether that we are all swimming in, right? And there is no separation, there's only distinction, if that makes sense. And then we could talk about like pantheism versus panentheism. I tend to take the approach that it's somehow paradoxically both, that like there is only God, but then there is also a distinct essence that is all-knowing, all-powerful, that we are inextricably linked to, but because we go through this purposeful forgetting process, we aren't accessing the full depth and breadth of what God actually is. That's a whole separate conversation, but that we access God by getting still and present, and we access God through the ether ultimately, right? And that's how you can tap into phenomena like telepathy, by continuing to cultivate that connection, that inherent link that you have with God. And so what they're doing with the millimeter wave towers that they're putting up all over the place, with the biosensors, with the wearable tech, with the smart devices, smart everything, is they're trying to create a synthetic version of that that is driven by AI. And since more and more people are falsely presuming, you see it happen all the time. You see it happen on X, where people will fact check someone with Grok. And I've already shown multiple times where Grok is incorrect in what it's saying, but people are already presupposing that AI knows all there is to know. about everything, as if AI is not programmable by those who are creating that specific AI. But nonetheless, they're trying to put AI in place of God, where we can connect with AI to get all the information that we need, where we can turn our thoughts to AI in order to access whatever information we might want to access. And it's a bastardized replacement for our inherent connection with God. And it's that it's not only trying to distract us from our inherent connection to God, to the ether, right? It's also that it's trying to override our connection to God in the ether and putting AI in place of it by using this synthetic version of ether.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's pretty deep. I think you're on point. Yeah, with that. Like, because really, what is the millimeter technology? It's like disturbances within the ether.
Yeah.
That then we have some type of physical phenomena that come from it, right? And it creates these little fields, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, and we know actually they're not great for us just on its face, right? So yeah, if you're referring to that as a synthetic ether, meaning like it's its own little layer that they've created synthetically that they're forcing
it's not
into
the
us.
ether, and it never could be the ether. It's that they're trying, ironically, they're using the ether to flood it with their frequencies.
Yeah. They're creating, and it's just so funny though. It's laughable if you think about it. Just right there, it's such a little minor portion of what really is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does make sense. It makes sense to get you to outsource your true power to kind of this much lower vibration, basically, like on its face. And then, yeah, you turn to AI for everything. And then if you turn to AI for everything, that's what I was, saying is I think that opens up pretty dangerous doors, because everyone's
100%.
outsourcing everything. Then it's like whoever's got that like master motherboard
Of all the AI information.
you're submitting to it, and they got all the info. And now, they could pretend to be God or something. But
yeah, sketchy.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the awesome stuff, the Aether Cosmology. I know we've touched on it quite a bit throughout this, but like, what have you come up with? I don't like to say like as a unified model for how the ether works, because we know models are always going to have holes in them inherently. But how do you describe Aether Cosmology?
Yeah, so I would just say that there's like an ocean. It's a primary substance, I would say that, or primary substrate, because it's what everything comes from. So just everything. I mean, this is a pretty interesting question, because I have to make some pretty bold speculations at times to fully answer it, I feel like. But there's this ever-present medium, and then there's something causing a disturbance in it, which we kind of touched on earlier. I would say a primary mover does that. And then everything that we see is manifested relative to that disturbance. And so, like when you were saying the thing about the medium, the ether, and then this connection to God, I would say that, yeah, it's like a medium that the communication goes through.
Yeah.
And so this primary mover causes a disturbance in the medium that then creates the fabric of reality itself.
Mm-hmm.
And we can actually point to like the physical phenomena of electrostatics for that. And so there's this fundamental vibration that's coming from something above and causing a disturbance that holds everything together, all matter together. And so anyway, that's like the first part of it. And then when the ether is thrown into, Tesla would say, infinitesimal prodigious whirls of velocity. So like really small, really fast little whirlpools. That's when matter's created. And that would mean the matter itself is ether. So you everything is. And so then all you're really trying to figure out is what kind of vibrational disturbance created whatever phenomena you're talking about, whether it's magnetism, electricity, matter, electrostatics. And then how does that interact with the ether now that, we interact with it however we do, if that makes sense. So it's just different modalities of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think actually Ken Willer, Theory of Hypothesis, breaks this down pretty good with like the idea of liquid or water. And you have ice, steam, and like liquid, right? The three modalities of water, it's all water.
There's a fourth phase, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's multiple different phases of water, but it's all water.
Yep.
So it's like they're different but the same.
Yeah.
And that's what everything is: electricity, magnetism, dielectricity, or static electricity. Same thing. They're all the same thing. They're all ether. Light, ether. So that's what I think fundamentally.
All the other elements are just variations of ether, essentially.
Yes, yes.
Elementals, rather.
And then, if you look into it, that's really, you get Walter Russell's periodic chart, him predicting things before they were known about, just understanding it's all based on frequency and vibration from the primary substance. And so then I would just say, like, yeah, literally everything is vibration. Nothing is at rest. I think if you want to get like zoom all the way out and kind of get like real philosophical here, I think we're in a process of seeking rest. So that's what everything is. Everything.
You say God is synonymous with stillness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so our whole life is just it's a process of trying to figure out that, for one, that's what the goal is, and two, trying to get there. And I think if you actually got there, you wouldn't be here anymore, because nothing here is truly at rest. If you can attain like a true meditative state of stillness, like you feel closer to the creator than ever, and you get epiphanies and have intuition, really hit you hard. And I think you're just still getting a little glimpse of it because you're still physically here. Like, you're not literally still. I would say that if you were literally still, you would not exist, because you would be in the form of ether.
That's like when monks become light bodies or rainbow bodies. Have you heard of that phenomenon?
Yes. Yeah.
Supposed phenomenon? I think it's real.
Yeah,
like,
and think about it,
they become so still that they literally like.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Think about how everything shows you this too. Like in physics, everything's about seeking equilibrium.
Yeah.
And what is equilibrium? Well, it's like a state of rest. So, but if I drop a feather and it falls down, then it rests on the ground, the feather is actually not resting. It's every component of it's vibrating. So it's actually still, vibrating is moving. So that isn't rest. That isn't technically being still. If somehow every little component of that feather actually attained rest, it would revert back into the ether.
Mm-hmm.
So technically that would be physically possible. Tesla pointed that out too, right? So, when the ether is thrown into infinitesimal prodigious swirls of velocity, then it manifests as ether. And when it resides, the motion resides, it reverts back into the ether. And so that's a physical component. Like matter, you could make it disappear. And if you, like, maybe even with your mind, right? Because you could alter the vibrational state of the matter with your mind if there's a medium that's connecting your mind and that. Or what is your mind? You get brain, mind. Mind's actually not even. So anyway, it's all very deep. I think this is why that they omit this and hold this down in general, to even start to examine the reality of the realm. Understanding it changes everything. But yeah, I know that was a lot, but that's what I think. I think to even understand it in terms of physics, it's all things are seeking equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
And the material world is not in a state of equilibrium. That's why it exists. Everything here is trying to get to a state of rest. And I think it's this perfect physical, symbolism of what actually our process is here, which is that we came from a place of stillness. We were disrupted. We're kind of thrown into the ocean and we're disrupted. And then our whole life, we're trying to get back to the stillness. And then that would be, you wouldn't be here anymore. Right.
So you're swimming in ether, trying to get back to stillness.
Yes. Yes. And we straight up already say that people go to rest.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's actually what it is. I think it's everything around you showing you what you're supposed to do. That makes sense? Because everything's seeking equilibrium.
Yeah.
All this is really simple and logical too, which also makes the most sense, right? Like whatever the truth is going to be really simple in my opinion. Yeah.
Makes sense to me. There's two more things within the context of ether that I want to touch on. And the first is that the toroidal shape, like how does that play into this whole thing? I know people have heard me talk ad nauseum, and everyone has heard me with Eileen McCusick, studies the human biofield anatomy, knowing that is one of many representations of what the human biofield may look like from the top or bottom view, but it's this toroidal field that surrounds the human body, but it also surrounds this realm, and that plays into how the ether functions. So could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's the most important thing ever, maybe. I think everything in all physics, from the small to the big, is torus field. So what they call an electron, torus field, everything. An atom, torus field. And so it makes sense that would be the preferred geometry, because it's sustainable. I mean, perpetual, basically, because it's going to keep going, looping in and out, right? Because it's like a donut.
Yep.
So you have a hole on the inside. You can just keep going in and out.
And it's vortexing back into itself.
Exactly.
And back through.
It's this beautiful like symmetry.
Yep.
And I think that's what everything is. And actually, this is the story of particle physics, right? Like they came up with this particle physics model, and then they started looking beyond that, and they saw, oh, there seems to be other things, and they all are making these torus fields, and then they got into subatomic particles. Is literally what happened. I mean, they realized there were little vortices and little torus fields and double torus fields, and then they just started naming them subatomic particles, meaning that the phenomena observed moved and manifested as if it was a torus field. So anyway, I think it's like the most important thing ever. I think the realm is just inside a giant torus field. I think your body's inside a giant torus field, and I think the smaller you would go, you'd see nothing but torus fields, and it's that's all it is. And this is what I think, that the secret of kind of all energy is magnetism, and that's because magnetism is a torus field. And if you look at a ferrocell cell image of a magnet, the center, that little circle, it's just black, and that's because I think it's just ether there.
Yeah.
So it's actually just a portal to the ether.
Wow.
So it sounds crazy, but
no, that's wild. That makes sense though.
So then you can think about like, what's a soul? What's a spirit? Your physical body has a torus field, but like what would be in your ether portal? You have some connection to, there's a portal within us that kind of animates us, I would say, that connects to that, to the ether. Now it's pretty deep, but so yeah, I think that's why that it is the shape, the geometry, because it's connected to the ether. So it's like a direct source, right? Which it's infinite as far as we can tell, right? So yeah, it's the shape of the most important shape by far in all of existence.
That's why I'm so stoked I chose it as my logo.
I know I said that when I first got here. I was on a call and I was like, dude, perfect.
Yeah.
It's
dude, I chose it before I knew any of this stuff. I chose it because I was like, oh, it just looks cool. And then like it's a perfect example of like God put that in my mind at that point in time, and then it coming full circle now. It's like, oh my God, that has so much deep meaning in so many ways in my life now.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's really cool.
And it's also, again, simple. Like, say, like golden ratio geometry, if you think in terms of shape, it's more simple than like some complex equation.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. It's also interesting to note too, from my understanding, if we look at the celestial bodies and their path throughout the sky over the course of a year, if you overlay all of them, it basically makes a variation of that shape too.
Yeah.
So cool.
Our life is everywhere.
Dude, it's so cool. So cool. The other thing I want to touch on, we touched on this briefly regarding like thought energy, and like you hear people say things like this realm is all mind. What are your opinions on how thought energy works as it relates to the ether and like creating things with our thoughts, or creating the concept of an egregore? Like, is that just a distortion in the ether that we bring about because so many people concentrate thought towards one specific idea, obviously hijacked by the mainstream sometimes for a fear-based narrative that brings real material effects? I mean, you can demonstrate this too. I know I'm speaking somewhat esoterically here, but I'll just give this example, and I love bringing this example up. So in his book, Can You Catch a Cold?, Daniel Roitis talks about this antidepressant that had just gone off patent, I believe, in New Zealand. And I think this was in 2017. And because of that, a lot of companies were able to make a generic version of this antidepressant. And so one specific generic version of that antidepressant started causing a lot of negative effects to the people who were taking it, where they were reporting 27 common side effects to whatever New Zealand's adverse events reporting system is with this specific drug. And there's 27 common side effects that they were reporting. For some reason, when the mainstream media decided to run a story on this drug that was causing a lot of side effects, they only named 6 of the 27 symptoms. Now, we could speculate whether they did that intentionally or not, but nonetheless, they only named 6 of those 27 common symptoms. What then followed was adverse events reports skyrocketed only in the 6 ones that the mainstream media had named. With like, I don't want to butcher the numbers, but I think it was like a 700% increase or something crazy like that. It was very crystal clear that it was because the mainstream media had put that thought into the minds of the masses that are then focusing on that, thus creating real physical symptoms associated with it. Yeah. Now, obviously, that's only an effect that is occurring amongst individuals, right, in their own bodies. But I think given that there is an ether, right? That the same could be applied to affecting the world outside of us by a lot of people concentrating thought towards one thing. And there's actually, you could say, some correlation. How do I put this? I guess you could draw some correlations between some studies that have been done where people will meditate on lowering crime in a specific area. And then unbeknownst to the people there, they have no clue that someone's meditating, or maybe only a few of them, but the crime will actually lower in a way that is measurable at that place because, well, I won't say because, I won't make a positive claim there, but it's a pretty strong correlation with the people who are meditating on that area. So all that to say, I think that there's pretty strong indication that like our thought energy has a direct impact on this realm. And it, again, just makes sense when there's an ether.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because another example is like home field advantage, but when certain events happen or certain players get hurt, the whole crowd starts to think their team's going to lose, and then they actually do.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think that that's largely like bread and circus kind of distraction, low vibrations.
Dude, you grew up playing sports, so I grew up playing sports. Like, there's still an element of me. I talk about this all the time. Like,
I love sports, and I think sports in themselves are good. Like,
totally.
But it can be very
like
tribalistic and distracting.
Totally. Like the NFL, like totally.
But no, I think that it's obviously real. You could come up with all kinds of ideas, meaning affecting outside of you. Affecting inside of you is undoubtedly real. I think that's actually what all health is, right? Like, you obviously heard like Germanic medicine and stuff. I think like wronging people and having like anxiety of it, and even if you don't have anxiety, if you're wronging, manipulating, you have to enter a certain vibration to manipulate and lie and stuff.
Totally.
And I think it manifests as illness. I think that's what it all is. And I think if whatever element you have, I don't want to say that literally all of it's because you did something wrong. I'm just saying that I think you could probably go work your way backwards. If you're being honest, you could find something that you need to correct.
Totally.
Something you need to make right that you did that would make that element go away.
Either like, I would say in addition to that, either something you did to someone else or something that was done to you or something that just occurred to you when you were younger or at a certain time in your life that you still have beliefs around, or on the other side of that you still have some karma and to some making amends that needs to be
done. Yeah. And you
some
have
combination of those things.
Exactly. You haven't fully integrated some experience or something that happened to you.
Yep.
And that's pretty deep and profound. And obviously, we know like with the Germanic medicine approach, they were able to even like kind of predict elements, right? In the brain specifically. So I find that very interesting. I don't think that's even disputed. You have the nocebo-placebo effect too, even like on a mainstream level, that's kind of acknowledged. So the logical extension actually would be that you could affect other things too. Mm-hmm. And then, when you talk about the ether, now again, it drastically changes. It drastically changes what is possible in that kind of framework. Where then, that's why I said, what is the mind? And that it opens up a door to like a really deep conversation, like what is the mind? But the mind is not the brain. And you make up your mind. You don't make up your brain, right? And it's like, it's pretty profound. It's like, what is the mind? And it is this connection to the ether, I would say.
Yeah.
And so, now what you're doing is you're causing a disturbance in the ether. So we're talking about like group consciousness. We're talking about everyone kind of, if you're putting out that same intention, that same energy, now you're just compounding that vibration, right?
Yeah.
So then of course it's that much more impactful. It's going to reciprocate that much more. It would be like I throw a pebble, or if we all throw a pebble at the same time, it's going to create much bigger of a ripple if we all throw it. I think it really is that simple of an analogy, is that it's like throwing a pebble, throwing a rock in the ocean of ether. And so, I think you can manifest reality. I think you can affect reality. And I think that if people were to all do it together, then they can negatively or positively affect it.
Negatively or positively, and that's the big bolded letters, negatively or positively, because I think that I'm going to assume that the individuals who want to control, dominate, and manipulate all of mankind, which is even an assumption itself. But like, I think there's pretty clear circumstantial evidence over the course of, at the very least, the last 5 years, if not beyond that, that would indicate that, and a lot of, paper trails that could easily demonstrate that as well. But I think that they're very aware of that. And I think that they weaponize that against us in that, first off, overwhelmingly, their agendas require our consent. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think that we don't realize that we're giving tacit agreement to a lot of the things that they are putting out there. But then they use our collective thought energy to bring about that which they want. And I think that this is where, as so-called truthers, especially people on the very like black pill-esque side of things that are constantly focused on the doom and gloom without offering the context on the other side of that like, and yes, that is a dark agenda that's going on, but here's what we can do about it. Let's align our thoughts and feelings. Let's focus on what we want now that we're aware of this. If they're not at the least doing that, they're causing more harm than good and constantly perpetuating and sharing on platforms with hundreds of thousands of people, hey, here's the dark agendas that are going on. You're helping to seed that idea into the minds of the masses, and almost even worse, because I would consider people who, this is a big claim, but people who are aware of what's going on in the world are much less likely to consume the toxic substances, have, let's say, as many toxic thoughts, just consume toxic things. So because of that, I would imagine that their capacity to bring about things in the ether is much higher than someone who is just mindlessly obedient
See where you're going.
to what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's almost worse when you have a very, very black-pilled truther with a massive account who is only focusing on all of the wrong that's going on without offering, and here's how powerful we are, and they're manipulating that against us so that we continue to focus on that. So now that we're aware of this, because there is some element of like, you need to be aware, otherwise you're bypassing, right? You need to be aware.
Yeah.
But now let's orient our thought energy over here collectively to bring about that which we want to create so that they're not hijacking our own thought energy.
Yeah,
anymore.
totally on point. And I think people give them too much credit. I think that's the big trick, actually, is they put so much effort into convincing you that they have power, but clearly they need us to at least acknowledge that for them to even have any kind of power.
100%.
Yeah, and then it always like gets under my skin. People give them so much credit, and they act like there's this super sophisticated, coordinated effort where they're just like immaculately, meticulously intelligent. No, they're not, dude. Like, even if you look at the pandemic, it was all over the place. Yeah, they had some elementary structure to it, and then it was all over the place. And it's like kind of like they're running around with their heads cut off. But then you can talk to it. It's an interesting point you make, because there's more responsibility with those who have learned about, especially when, if you've kind of cleaned yourself up, you may be, manifesting more efficiently, we'll say, where you're giving them that credit.
100%.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point to drive home, because I've even caught myself at times like,
I do it too, by the way.
I'm thinking like, my audience, I'm not thinking of it like this, but I can see that I can see that I'm just telling them the bad thing, you know? And like, it's like, but really you can look at all the deceptions, and they're all clearly geared around consent.
Totally.
All of them. So they obviously need our consent. So I would say even one of the strongest evidences for what we were just talking about, that we can affect the world around us, is how some people that may have malevolent intention are so hyper-focused on getting our consent.
Yeah.
And dude, like I tell people all the time, they can't take over Americans. There are way too many guns here, for example.
I say all the time too.
They need to just make sure you don't get your gun. Like you, that's why they're aiming at the Trump side of things right now.
Totally.
We're not to get into that, but obviously that's the side that has the guns. That's the side that would use the guns.
True.
If you don't even go,
you and I are on the same page on that. That it's all
yeah.
like a false dilemma psyop anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But anyway, I think that all comes down to, it's just like consent.
Yeah.
And then thus controlling your intent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you just got to take the power back. That's a very uplifting, that's an empowering thing.
It is.
Yeah.
And if that may seem, I don't know how it could be if you listen to this entire conversation, if that seems too woo for you, I always say this. Okay. Your thoughts, feelings, and actions are predicated on what? Your foundational beliefs. That's what they're predicated on. So your real world things that you do on a day-to-day basis are predicated on your foundational belief systems. And if you're continuing to believe that other men and women have the right to tell you what to do, have the right to wield power and authority over you, or if you believe that X individual, Y corporation has legitimate power over you, or they're so much more powerful than you can ever be, whether you realize it or not, on a subtle level, that is then impacting your thoughts, feelings, and actions on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. I think we could all agree on that.
Absolutely.
Like outside of the whole thought energy conversation, which like I'd take to be real, obviously. But if, again, that's too woo-woo, you can at least be like, okay, yeah, where in my belief systems am I continuing to outsource power to this side of things?
Yeah. And everyone is being tricked into doing it all the time.
All the time.
That's why, a lot of what we covered earlier, sometimes that's where you have to meet people. They've been so hit with this materialistic, framework.
Yep.
They need to kind of be shaken out of that, because it isn't just, it sounds cooler or I want it to be true. The actual physical evidence always shows it.
Yeah.
Always shows. And so if you take that to its conclusion, it's what we just were talking about. So you're just going to need to accept the truth for what it is, right? And it's an empowering thing. It's a good thing. Yeah.
So empowering. I think that's it for me. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
No, man. I think it's a great talk.
Yeah, this was epic, man. Thank you so much, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Sorry, for those that are listening, watching, we've had to stop a few times because my ankle is like swelling out of my shoe right now because funny enough, like talking about, bringing about something. I think a lot of the times chronic illness or an injury is a result of you not being fully present in your body. And I was just so in my head this morning because I have so much going on right now. Third baby that we just had, Confluence, the festival that I'm planning is about to happen. Kylie's not feeling well as of yesterday. So I'm like managing all the things. And I was just so caught up in worry in my head. And then on my run, I stepped on a rock while I'm like sprinting and just twisted my ankle. So, but I think I did all right considering.
You did good. You made it through, brother.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for being here, dude.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you.
Yeah.